Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
All right, hello and howdy, folks. It is shaping up to be an epic EcoCast today here as we explore the topic Zero Trust Security, Truth versus Fiction. Zero Trust seems to be a security topic that is always being discussed, especially as our user bases and workforces are requiring more and more remote access. Many of us have embraced Zero Trust already in our organizations. Others maybe are a little unclear on what exactly Zero Trust is, how to implement its principles, and understanding the potential benefits that can be enjoyed from using Zero Trust. So today, let's separate truth from fiction, and that way you can continue your Zero Trust journey well informed. I'm thrilled to have not one, not two, but 6 teams presenting today. We have top experts in the field from Zscaler, Rubrik, HP Aruba Networking, Okta, No Name, and Palo Alto Networks. All of that in addition to our talented keynote speaker, Lindsay Kay, who is going to get us started here shortly. I know you are all ready and pumped up to begin, and we have a boatload of information to cover today. So we will get rolling here with just a few last little bits of information, and then our speakers will be on out. So very quickly, my name is Mackenzie Puddesy, and I am a moderator here at Actual Tech Media, and my friends and fellow moderators Jess Steinbach, Scott Becker, and Keith Ward are here with us on live chat today. And I also have Jess waiting in the wings to help interview our keynote speaker in an extra entertaining fashion. And in more exciting news, prizes. Yes, today on the EcoCast, you could win one of 3 $300 Amazon gift cards. And not only that, there is a $50 Best Question gift card for each session. So make sure you are sending in your questions and you are active in the chat today. Send that energy and excitement around to your fellow attendees with a big hi, hello, howdy, hola, aloha, bonjour, or whatever greeting of your choice. Why don't you go ahead and do that now in the questions tab and make sure you're awake and alive out there. Now, as mentioned, for any of the prizes today, this was in the housekeeping chat, but you can find the full T's and C's in the handouts tab if you have any questions. And of course, we do have handouts from all of our great presenters. So whether you do it now or a little bit later, you're going to want to click in there and check it out. Now, I'm so excited to introduce our keynote speaker today. We have Lindsay Kay, Vice President of Threat Intelligence at Human Security, who is going to be helping us discern fact from fiction, truth from fiction about Zero Trust. And my fellow moderator here, Jess, is ready to pose some questions. So why don't we get things rolling? Lindsay, Jess, the stage is yours.
Well, hey all, so happy to be joining you here today, and I have with me as a special treat the one and only Lindsay Kay, and we are going to be playing a little bit of Zero Trust True False. Lindsay, you ready to jump in?
Let's do it, Jess.
All right. So we're gonna start out. We're gonna test the audience's Zero Trust IQ with us today. So feel free as we're going along. If you want to post an answer in the chat, we would love to hear from you as we go. And let's start out with a little bit of a warm-up round. This is your introduction. We're gonna see how awake you all are. Mackenzie is one super cool moderator. Lindsay, what do you think about this one?
I definitely think he is, and I think the answer to this one is true.
You know, Lindsay, I feel really good about that. I think Mackenzie is a super cool guy. I think we're going to go with true. Look at that. A pluses for everybody.
Go.
That was your softball. That was the easy round. All right, let's see if we can step it up a notch. We're going to get a bit harder. Lindsay, Zero Trust is a solution or product. What do you got? True, false?
So this one is definitely false. So there are definitely a lot of products that address aspects of zero trust, such as those that our vendors are here to speak about today. But zero trust is not a product itself. So instead, it's a security framework built around the idea that all users are required to be authenticated, authorized, and continuously validated for security configuration and posture before they can get or keep access to resources within the network. And this applies to both users inside and outside of the organization's network. So where the network can be any combination of local or cloud resources located anywhere. So this is really important considering today's highly globalized workforce. So moreover, zero trust as a concept reduces the risk of something like, for example, an initial access via legitimate credentials leading to a full compromise of the network. So unlike more traditional security models that require one-time validation, possibly without multi-factor authentication, the concept of zero trust moves past the trust but verify approach, in which a user will automatically be trusted once they're inside the network. Zero trust combines a lot of different principles of security practice that we've previously discussed. So multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, network segmentation, assessing resources for misconfigurations, implementing access control, and more. So why does the myth of zero trust as a solution or product exist? And how do we start moving past this perception to a better understanding of what zero trust actually is? So today, you're going to hear from a bunch of our vendors whose products and services address different aspects of implementing a zero trust framework in order to help provide some clarity as you create your mental model of the product and zero trust framework relationship.
I think that's so important, and I think that was a great place to start, Lindsay, because I do think you're right that this is something that is sort of misunderstood. Mm-hmm. So, audience, we're gonna check our answer here. Dun 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 dun. You and Lindsay were all right. False. That one's false. Great. All right. Well, let's try our next one, because I think that this is one that comes up quite a bit, Lindsay. If we're talking about something that could feel like a massive overhaul, it could feel like a big change. So that comes with price tags, right? Dollar signs coming out of our eyes. So zero trust is just way too expensive to implement. What do you think? True, false?
So I think this is false. And this is definitely one that I've also heard as well. And once we all kind of gotten past the myth about zero trust being a product, I'm sure a lot of us start to think, well, if it's not a product, how do I even begin to deploy everything I need for this? And certainly the concept as a whole seems pretty big and involved, like you said, and may initially feel extremely daunting when we start considering all of it as a whole, rather instead as a sum of its pieces. So like most security solutions, though, zero trust can be thought of as a series of different pieces that an organization can implement over time rather than having to completely overhaul their network and security strategy all at once. So one way I'd encourage you to think about implementing zero trust, especially if you do not have a huge budget or team with which to do so, is if you start looking at some of the pieces and implementing them to provide incremental improvement. So for example, if we look at one piece of the puzzle, which is, for example, access control and granularity of access as a starting point, we have a couple of different pieces we can begin to apply. So previously I've spoken about security aspects of different types of multi-factor authentication methods. And while some are certainly stronger than others, this is an initial step that many organizations either have taken or can take in the future. And in 2024, many resources and tools exist to make it easier. Another aspect we can also tackle is the general network and security hygiene. So things like pruning accounts, reducing the number of individuals with high privilege levels to only those who need it, and enforcing strong passwords or accounts, especially those belonging to administrators, and evaluating the access is granted to various users and network resources. So finally, a last step that likely requires a little bit more effort and investment to really fully complete will be thinking about how you would do network segmentation and trying to put that into practice. So obviously a big undertaking, but an initial step here could look like developing a full understanding of what all your network resources are, especially if your organization is large, and then being able to document it and then understand who has access to each and what can talk to each other or not. So this is something that not only can help you if you do plan to do further network segmentation and kind of pursue that, but as we think about other parts of cybersecurity, if an incident does occur, and it's critical to have that understanding of the current resource allocation in different parts of your network, this is super important. And if you think about kind of from the ransomware perspective, which we've talked about previously, if you have a disaster recovery plan, this is a key piece of it. So really something that can benefit a lot of different aspects, but also get you closer to that zero trust approach.
Okay, so you've mentioned a couple of times a few different aspects of zero trust, and I have a follow-up question for you. But before I move into that, let's see if this is true, false. Dun, da, 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 drum roll, drum roll, drum roll. False. You were right. All right, you in the audience, 10 for 10 already. Here we go. All right, let's try one more. So when we were talking about all of the different aspects of implementing a zero trust guiding principles or a zero trust approach in your organization, you on a couple of times mentioned that it could feel very complex. It could feel very overwhelming. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there in the audience that are thinking that, all right, well, so we've made a good argument that it's not too expensive and that it is the set of guiding principles, but that's a lot to think about. It's not, wouldn't it be nice if it was just a simple checkbox? So that does feel very complicated. That does feel like it's a big, heavy lift. Is it too heavy? Is it too complex? What do you think? True, false?
So I think this is false.
Okay.
So again, we talked a little bit about how if we consider it as that full framework, it seems super daunting if we're trying to think about how do we approach it as a whole. And then we consider immediate implementation of all the pieces at once. That's a huge undertaking. So outside of some of the recommended ways of thinking about zero trust that I already covered, it's important to consider the fact that not every piece of these steps needs to be homegrown or implemented from the ground up. So there are many different products and services that can help address these different pieces, like I said before, about for zero trust framework. And it's definitely something that you can make a build versus buy choice on, rather than having to kind of start at the ground floor and being required to implement everything yourself, because that's huge. Importantly, many of our organizations may actually already be using different pieces of the zero trust framework already as part of their security strategy. So if you start to reframe the challenge of implementation to one of really augmenting your existing practices, that can also help reduce some of what we consider this huge level of complication. So again, check out some of what our vendors are going to be talking about today and continue to evaluate what already exists out there before writing zero trust off as way too complicated, and think about those different pieces rather than that whole huge undertaking of the framework.
That's some great advice. So let's see. Way too complicated to implement, and that is false. Lindsay's just giving you some great steps and ideas for how you can reduce that complexity and make that feel a little more accessible. I think this is our last, second to last. This is our last question of zero trust, true, false. And we have a few guiding principles that we want to review. So Lindsay, are these the 3 guiding principles of zero trust: least privilege access, explicit verification, and assumed breach?
Yes, they are. This is true. So if we look at these 3 guiding principles, I think they really help to emphasize that framework aspect of the concept. And I think really it helps distill the purpose and tenets down pretty well if you look at kind of these 3 concepts. So basically, what these do mean is that we're avoiding something like the assumed trust with resources in other parts of the network. And there's a couple different ways that we can do that, some of which I've already addressed today. As you can imagine, some of this might also materialize in practice, involve solutions that provide increased visibility of traffic within the network, adding other context-based verification parameters to decide if an access request is valid, and implementing users to app or app to app connections over connections to whole networks. In case you've seen kind of other resources or ways of describing some of the zero trust stuff, you may have also seen some of those things, but I think that this is kind of a great way of if you really sort of distill the purpose of zero trust down into these 3 guiding principles.
Fantastic. Okay, so today we have learned Mackenzie is one super cool moderator. We have learned that zero trust is an approach and a set of guiding principles rather than a checkbox. We've learned that it is not too expensive, it is not too complex, and we've learned what some of those big 3 foundational kind of points are when we're thinking about zero trust. This is a huge amount of information and a great place to start our day. So our bonus question for the audience out there, for you, Lindsay, you are all taking a great first step just by attending here today. Lindsay, what do you think?
Yeah, this is certainly true. So I think some of the key aspects of zero trust is, first of all, understanding what it is, what a zero trust solution entails, and what options we have to get there. So if you've just embarked on your zero trust journey, you can use today as that initial step in your investigation. Or if you're already pretty familiar with zero trust, today is really more of a continued learning experience to really augment your understanding of what tools and services are out there to help you. So yeah, enjoy today, and I'll see you later.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming to play Zero Trust True False with our audience. Thanks to everyone out there who played along with us. What a great start to the day. And now I think we're going to hand things right back on over to the one and only super cool Mackenzie Pittasey. Mackenzie, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I will take the super cool title and try my best to earn it here as we embark on our EcoCast Zero Trust journey together. You two really know how to butter somebody up. So thanks again, Lindsay. Thanks again, Jess. That was such an entertaining way to set the stage for today. Definitely cannot wait to explore this topic. Now, just before we jump into our first session, I do have a question for you there. I want to make sure you're all awake and alive and enthusiastic. I know you are because I saw so many great responses during the true and false. But the question here is, what is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? Is this something you're looking to do right away in the next 6 months? Is this kind of 6 to 12 months by end of year, so to speak? Or are you looking kind of longer, a couple years out? Or maybe you're not sure and you are still just kind of getting a read on what technologies are out there. What are the best practices? What are the strategies I can employ? So take a second, fill that in there. And I am about to bring out our first speaker for today, but I want to remind you that there is a $50 best question gift card from each session. So I encourage you while listening to our first presenter to send in some mindful questions. Interaction is indeed the name of the game. The more hellos, the more highs, the more questions, the greater the conversation we'll have, and the more we're all going to take away from this webinar. I promise. So again, thanks for filling out that poll. And with that, I am super excited, and it is indeed my pleasure to introduce you to our first expert presenter in today's EcoCast. And you can see we are starting things off on a high note today. Please welcome from the Zscaler team, Jacob Serpa. Jacob is the Senior Portfolio Marketing Manager at Zscaler. And Jacob, I will be joining you for some Q&A, but until then, are you ready to rock?
Yeah. Hey, Mackenzie. Thanks for that intro, and I'm ready to go.
Awesome. My pleasure. Well, take it away, and I'll hop back in for some Q&A after you've presented all the magic you've got in store for us.
Hey, I think you're good at buttering people up yourself. So thanks for that, Mackenzie. Hey, everybody. It's good to be with you here today. Again, I'm Jacob, and the title of this talk here is The Truth About Zero Trust, the Importance of Architecture. And so I think a good place to kick things off as we consider securing the world of tomorrow is to think about the world of yesterday so we can understand the differences and why they matter. So to put it very directly here, yesterday's architectures are poor fits for the modern world. And when I say yesterday's architectures, there are lots of ways to refer to this idea. You might hear legacy architecture, perimeter-based architecture, network-centric architecture, firewall and VPN-based architecture, all kinds of different names, but it's all referring to the same thing that you can see in this diagram here. So imagine with me that we have this organization that's starting out in the world of yesteryear, before cloud apps, before remote work, and they just have this one location. They have this one office with the affixed data center, and all their users, apps, and data are in that one building. Well, when the organization's thinking about security, takes a look around and says, well, everything that we want to secure is here on the network, so let's just build a secure perimeter around our network to keep the bad things out and the good things in, hence perimeter-based security. You might also hear castle and moat security, because you can think of that perimeter as a moat around the castle. Now, that approach worked well enough in this, single location on-premises only scenario. But then the organization starts to grow, and they build some branch sites, they build some factories, some new offices. But all of those new locations are beholden to the data center where they have security and connectivity being provided. And so every time they spin up a new location, they have to extend the network to that new location. Now, this starts to increase complexity. But then the organization continues to grow and starts embracing some aspects of digital transformation. So they have remote users and cloud applications now. Once again, those new users that are off premises, that are working remotely, as well as those clouds, they're all beholden to the data center, and the network has to be extended to them. And so very quickly, you get this complex, highly interconnected mesh of connections between users, sites, apps, devices, clouds. And it just leads to a lot of complexity and, in fact, a lot of rigidity very quickly. And this setup becomes a barrier to transformation because it's not designed to enable cloud, to enable remote work, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, it's going to increase risk from a security perspective. So let's have an illustration here to help understand why that's the case. Very straightforward illustration. Just imagine you have an unescorted visitor come to your office. Maybe they get carded at the door, maybe they don't. But once they're inside your building, they can now roam around unescorted. They can open any door, they can sit down at any desk, they can go talk to anybody, put their hands on any device. Obviously, that's pretty concerning from a security perspective, right? And yet that's effectively what happens every single day with these firewall-centric, VPN-based kinds of architectures. Because, as I mentioned, they're focused on building a perimeter, building a moat around the castle. But once a cyber criminal gets past the moat and into your castle, it's easy for them to move across the different rooms inside of your castle. So again, they get past the perimeter, and it's easy to move laterally across connected resources on the network and expand the reaches of their breaches. And so this is what's known as lateral threat movement or lateral propagation. But that's actually only one of 4 key ways that perimeter-based architectures increase risk. And so we'll go through all 4 of them on this slide as it builds out here. But to start, once again, let's just consider an organization in the on-prem only world. They have this one site, all their users, apps, and data are there. And so they're using this perimeter-oriented kind of approach. But then they start to grow. Again, they get some branch sites, some factories. Maybe they even spin up some cloud workloads. Again, they have to extend the network to these new clouds and locations. And then they keep growing. Maybe they're going to spin up some cloud workloads in GCP this time. They'll have some users moving off premises that are working remotely. And again, the network has to be extended to all of these new users, devices, clouds, and locations. And so this gets pretty complex, as we already talked about. Now that brings us to the first key way that perimeter-based architectures increase risk. Now, there are 2 ways that it's actually going to be going about this first problem. So first of all, as your network expands and you extend it to more users, devices, clouds, etc., you are effectively making more entry points into your network. There are more things that can be targeted in order to get into your environment by cyber criminals. So as you expand your network, you're expanding your attack surface. Now, what makes things even more challenging is the fact that the go-to tools for securing this network are tools like firewalls and VPNs, which have public IP addresses. Now, to be fair, that's by design so that your valid users can traverse the web and find these side and back doors into your network, and they can access the resources they're in and do their jobs. Fair enough. However, public IP addresses can be found by cyber criminals as well. And they're all too eager to try to locate and kick those doors down so that they can get inside your network and do a lot of damage. And so sadly, as your network expands, your attack surface expands. As you use more and more tools like firewalls and VPNs, you are likewise, creating more attack surface through these public IP addresses. And so the bad guys are able to find you. And once they find you, they want to compromise you. And in order to stop compromise, it sounds pretty straightforward to just say, well, we need to inspect all of our traffic in real time and enforce policy in real time to stop that compromise. Now, if you want to inspect all of your traffic, there's a little bit of a wrinkle there. You need to be able to inspect encrypted traffic because over 95% of web traffic today is in fact encrypted. Now, that's where the challenge comes in, because inspecting encrypted traffic is a really resource-intensive process. It takes a lot of compute power. And sadly, perimeter-based architectures are typically going to be appliance-based architectures. And whether those appliances are hardware or virtual appliances, they have a fixed capacity to handle a certain throughput, to handle a certain volume of traffic, meaning they can't scale up indefinitely as your organization grows in order to inspect all of your encrypted traffic, which again is where threats are typically going to hide, because cyber criminals know that organizations often struggle to inspect that encrypted traffic. And so, all too often, threats are able to pass through organizations' defenses because they can't inspect this encrypted traffic at scale, because they're relying on perimeter-based architectures and these kinds of appliance-based tools. Now, once they compromise you, they move laterally, meaning across network resources, connected applications. As they do so, they're going to be dropping off threats along the way, as well as scouring your environment for sensitive information, which brings us to number 4 here, where they're going to steal your data. And again, they know that there's this tendency for organizations to lack encrypted traffic inspection, and so increasingly they are hiding data exfiltration inside of encrypted traffic. And so beyond all of the cost and complexity and user experience and productivity challenges of this approach, of utmost importance is the fact that these kinds of perimeter-based architectures are increasing risk. And so as we think about digital transformation, it becomes really apparent really quickly that this kind of architecture is a bad fit for securely enabling digital transformation. Something fundamentally different is required. And fortunately, that's where zero trust comes into the picture. So the analogy for zero trust is not that of a moat for a castle, but rather think of an intelligent switchboard that is securely connecting any one entity to any one other entity or resource. So as an example, you are connecting one user directly to one application. You are not putting people on the network as a whole. You are not extending network access. This is in keeping with the principle of least privileged access, which we saw during that true-false session, which means people only get access to the things they need at the moment they need to do them and nothing more. So no excessive permissions, no default implicit trust, rather think intelligent switchboard, least privileged access. And this intelligent switchboard, this policy enforcement point, if you will, is going to be in the form of a zero trust cloud that is global, is effectively omnipresent, and is going to be delivering that zero trust connectivity as a service at the edge. And so business policies will be determining who can access what, and the network effectively just becomes plumbing. It becomes transport. It becomes irrelevant. People can access anything over any network in this intelligent fashion. So this approach is far more agile and simple and enables transformation. And most importantly, it's far more secure in the modern world. So this is a Zscaler specific diagram for zero trust, but I think it really illustrates the point well, so I wanted to share it here. So on the bottom, you'll see the various entities in your organization that are wanting to access your IT resources. On the top, you'll see those resources. One box says managed by others, think the internet, software as a service applications, and the other box says managed by you. These are your private apps that you build, you maintain, whether they're deployed in your data center or in some kind of infrastructure or platform as a service offering. And then in the middle, you see this Zscaler cloud, which denotes this zero trust cloud, and this policy enforcement point, this intelligent switchboard that's processing all traffic and is having all traffic flow through it by virtue of the fact that it is a global security cloud. So what happens when someone attempts access? Well, traffic flows through this cloud, and first of all, it's going to say, stop, who are you? It's going to verify identity. Then it's going to say, okay, I see I see who you are, but where are you going? What's the destination you're trying to reach? And then it does something really important. It's going to determine risk, and risk needs to be determined in an adaptive, continuous fashion based on the context of access. You might have heard this expression that context is the new perimeter. And so using context to determine risk and then governing access based on that is really important, because identity alone is not enough to determine if someone should be able to access something. We all know that, that's kind of the way that it was done for a long time, or okay, someone has valid credentials, they get access to what they want. But there are two key problems with that. First, identity can be stolen. Pretty obvious challenge there. But second, you might have valid users with valid credentials who are either malicious or perhaps are just careless, who can still do damage to your organization. And so you need to be able to look at context to determine risk and not just identity alone. Now you have in that box to the left 4 categories or examples of risk. We'll just spend a minute talking through them. So first, there's the user risk. You might see UEBA in parentheses there. That just means user and entity behavioral analytics. In essence, what is the user doing? Is it unusual or is it suspicious? Next, there's device risk. What is the type of endpoint that the user is on? Because you probably want to treat a managed corporate laptop pretty differently from a personal iPhone. There's also the posture of the device. Does it have the latest patches and updates in place for the operating system, as well as the security solutions on that endpoint? Third, there is destination and content risk, meaning is the user going somewhere malicious, handling something malicious, or handling sensitive information that is at risk of leaking? Now, TLS inspection there just means, encrypted traffic inspection, because again, most web traffic today is encrypted. And so if you want to be able to understand destination and content risk, you need to be able to look inside of the encrypted traffic to see where they're going and what they're handling. Now, the difference here is when you have a zero trust architecture and you have this highly performant, highly scalable zero trust cloud that is delivering security to you as a service, instead of relying upon an appliance, then it's going to be able to scale as needed in order to inspect all of your encrypted traffic and give you an understanding of this context and risk. Now, last but not least, there you have third-party intel. This just means, hey, you have good solutions and technologies in your environment, and they're doing a good job for you. And so that intel, that recon that they provide, should be able to be ingested by your zero trust cloud. It can use it to understand context better, to assess risk more effectively, and to enforce policy properly. And so that brings us to step 4 here, the go or no go decision, where you want to have policy enforced on a per session basis, meaning every time that access is attempted here, it's going to go through this process. Now, what you're seeing here goes a long way towards addressing those 4 key weaknesses of perimeter-based architectures that I talked about previously. So first things first, when you're able to proxy traffic, when you're able to inspect encrypted traffic at scale, look at context, look at risk, and see what's happening in real time, you're going to be able to see compromise and data loss as someone is attempting to do it. And that means you're going to be able to stop those cyber attacks and stop that data loss, which are 2 of those 4 weaknesses of perimeter-based architectures that we talked about previously. Now, similarly, policy is enforced on a per session basis, as I mentioned. You are connecting users to apps, not to networks. This inherently eliminates lateral threat movement, because even if someone were to reach an application, which they won't be able to because you're going to be able to stop that illegitimate access, there still wouldn't be anywhere for them to move laterally to, because they're not on the network. You're connecting them to applications directly. And then last but not least, minimize the attack surface. You'll notice that the arrows at the top are pointing in different directions. And that's intentional, because when it comes to your private apps that you maintain, you want to handle them a little bit differently. You don't want to have inbound connections or public IP addresses that are broadcasting an attack vector for the bad guys. So instead of an inbound connection, you want to have what's known as an inside-out connection, where this piece of software or this connector is going to sit on the app side of things, is going to reach out to the Zero Trust Cloud, which will subsequently stitch things together so that that user can then access that app if they are in fact determined to be authorized for access. And so when your apps are effectively hidden behind the Zero Trust Cloud, your attack surface goes dark and is effectively eliminated for cyber criminals. And so as you can see, Zero Trust architecture is a very different way of doing things that inherently solves the problems of perimeter-based architectures, as well as the tools that they are built from, so firewalls and VPNs. And so if we return to our illustration from earlier, again, perimeter-based architecture is like having a visitor come to your office and wandering around unescorted. But with a Zero Trust architecture, it's going to be very different. Instead, the user can't even find your office unless they're invited to it. Then, once they show up, their identity is verified at the door, their belongings are inspected for threats, and they're going to be blindfolded and escorted to the meeting room where they have their meeting. The blindfold and the escort are there to make sure they don't wander around or even snoop around visually. Once the meeting is done, they're going to be escorted back out Their belongings will be inspected again to see if they're trying to take anything with them. The blindfold will be removed and they'll be allowed to go on their way. So this is obviously a fundamentally different way of doing things, as I've said. So zero trust architecture is very powerful for securing digital transformation. And so at Zscaler, zero trust architecture is what we're all about. Our mission is to secure, simplify, and transform businesses so that they can flourish in the modern world. And our customers tell us every day that we help them reduce risk, eliminate cost and complexity, and increase business agility. Now, there are a lot of different facts and figures I could bring up here in order to, kind of paint more of a picture and put more flesh on these things we've been talking about, but I'll settle to just do a quick flyby of some of what you see here. So first things first, if you are going to be, trusting a vendor's cloud and routing all of your traffic through it for security and connectivity, that now becomes a mission critical service. And you want to make sure that that mission critical service isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. You don't want them to fail as a company. And so at Zscaler, we are a strong public company. We have solid financials, over $2 billion in annual recurring revenue, and we are the market leader with over 40% of the Fortune 500 being among our customers. And it's not just the biggest organizations in the world. We're used by various customers across industries, across geos, and across various sizes. Now, we love to delight our customers. That's why our Net Promoter Score is over 70, while the SaaS average is less than half that at 30. And perhaps most importantly, we're the technology leader. We are the original pioneers and continued innovators in zero trust architecture. And we have the world's largest inline security cloud that has a massive scale, over 400 billion transactions every single day, which is more than 20 times the number of Google searches. And so we've been a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant that is relevant to our space for over 12 years now, starting with the initial quadrant, which was Secure Web Gateway, and now in the Magic Quadrant for what's known as Security Service Edge. And so my overall message here is everyone here should take a long, hard look at zero trust as a part of reducing risk. But also, if you're going to take a long, hard look at zero trust and looking at that architecture, then you should also take a long, hard look at Zscaler. So thank you so much for your time. That does it for the speaking portion of this session. And Mackenzie, happy to turn things over to you so that we can go to some Q&A for a few minutes here.
Sure thing. Great presentation. I have to say that was one of the most concise, easily digestible ways to present zero trust I've seen in a long time. So thanks for that. Great way to start the day. And I'm going to quickly just throw up a poll. So if you are out in the audience now and you're curious about a little bit more information from Zscaler, feel free to answer that poll and they will essentially hand you over exactly what you're looking for. So you're looking for a white paper, data sheet, pricing details, a demo. After today's EcoCast, they'll follow up and be able to give you exactly what you are looking for. So I'm going to leave that up while we do the Q&A. So you've got a little time, but don't wait forever. And we do have quite a few questions, so I'm going to try and hit as many as I can with you. Jacob, are you ready to field some of these?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so first one here is, so do I need to retire all of our firewalls and VPNs and everything else in order to use zero trust?
That is a great question. And I feel like anytime I talk about this subject, that question comes up. So, it's a great question, and I'm glad I get to answer it here. So the short answer is no. You do not have to blow up your whole environment in order to embrace zero trust. Now, that said, we do have customers that come to us and say, hey, we just want to redo everything. We want to fully, ditch all of these firewalls and VPNs and go zero trust architecture. Like, let's do it. That happens sometimes. Typically, that's not what happens, though. Usually, organizations come to us and they want to have zero trust architecture operating in parallel with their existing network-centric type stuff built on firewalls and VPNs. And so what happens over time is even though they begin having both of these architectures in place, doing and securing different things for them, they see the value of the zero trust architecture. They see it not only reduce risk, but reduce complexity, help eliminate various appliances, cut down on cost, provide a better user experience, better user productivity, And so they increasingly shift things over to zero trust, begin to eliminate more and more of their legacy tools, and embrace zero trust. So that's the typical trajectory. But as you're first looking into zero trust, no, you don't have to just blow up your whole environment right away. That is not the case.
Amazing. So you've got a few ways to go about it. You can definitely say, hey, let's just rip out the carpet from underneath us kind of thing and go all in, but you definitely don't have to.
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got a
That's right.
question. Oh, sorry. From Peter here. He's saying, is Zscaler identifying the user or is a separate identity solution required?
That is a fantastic question. So we do integrate with whatever identity provider you might have. For example, I see that Okta is on the call today. They're one of our technology partners. We love playing nicely with Okta. We integrate with them with tons of our customers. So them and basically any other IDP you can imagine, we're going to be able to integrate with, and you're not going to have to change your IDP, so to speak. So you can keep using what your best of breed solution is there, and we can come in on top of that.
Nice. All right. Next question here from Gary is, how would you manage access requests when both the quantity of identities and applications are constantly increasing? The number of connections between them will scale out of control. I figure your name is Zscaler, so let's see what you have to say about it.
Yeah, that's a perfect lead-in. Our name actually stands for something, which is zenith of scalability. There's your some extra trivia for you today. But
Nice.
Our vision from the very beginning was to be this highly scalable, high-performance cloud platform that can, in fact, be the pinnacle of scalability. And so, as I mentioned at the kind of the statistics slide towards the end of the presentation there, we have the world's largest inline security cloud. We have over 400 billion daily transactions or requests going through our platform and 500 trillion daily telemetry signals being generated. And so we're used by, not just smaller organizations, but by over 40% of the Fortune 500. And so the world's largest organizations across geos around the world are using us in some cases to secure, even 1 million plus users. So we scale like nobody's business. And in fact, there was a third-party analysis that we asked to be conducted, and they determined they couldn't even detect the upper end of our scalability. They tried to overwhelm our platform, and they couldn't do it. So scalability,
Nice.
Not at all a problem.
Amazing. I like that. Okay, we are almost at time, but I'm going to try to throw you one or two more quick questions. One here, Jeff is asking,
Sure.
Is the software US government approved?
Yes, I'll try to do the lightning round thing. So yes, we have, the highest FedRAMP and all that kind of stuff. We have a dedicated Zscaler cloud for federal. So yes, we work nicely with government organizations.
Perfect. And what was the other question I had here? Hot topic these days, AI. How is Zscaler implementing AI into what you guys do?
Okay, great question. I'll try to answer it in like 60 seconds. So AI is obviously a pretty hot topic. It's pretty trendy. There's good reason for that because it's very powerful and useful. But this is something we've been doing from the beginning that goes along with our vision of being this high performance, highly scalable cloud, because we knew we would have a massive data set. We would have a ton of customer traffic flowing through us. And so to that end, we would be able to use AI to learn from all these things and make sure our offerings were as automated and effective for customers as possible. So I tend to think about our offerings around AI in two buckets, even though in reality, AI is kind of sprinkled in throughout our entire platform. So first of all, we have things like digital experience monitoring that is powered by AI, so you can make sure your users are productive as possible. And you can resolve user experience problems with AI-powered root cause analysis. You just click a button and you get the solution. But we also use AI to help reduce risk. So things like AI-powered inline cloud sandboxing, if that's enough adjectives for you, as well as auto data classification, where you don't even have to set up a dictionary or configure a policy. You open up Zscaler and it's going to say, boom, here are the data patterns in your environment. Here's where they're going. So, what kinds of security would you like to put in place? So that's my attempt at a very quick answer to that question.
Thank you. I appreciate the brevity. That's great. We definitely don't have time to get to all the questions today, so we will, or these will get handed on to you and your team at Zscaler, and you guys can follow up with any information that went unanswered. But any final call to action or sign off before I let you go?
I would just say to everyone, hey, thanks for listening. I believe we have a handout that you can download from the console in front of you, so do check that out. And also, we run monthly intro to zero trust webinars at Zscaler. So if you're wanting to, attend another webinar that's, we'll say entry level, designed to be introductory, just go to our website, check out our webinars, and register for our next upcoming intro to zero trust webinar. So that'll do it for me, Mackenzie. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here, and hope to have you on again soon.
Thanks, and likewise. Take care.
Cheers. Take care. All right. As mentioned, thank you for all of those questions. We don't have time to get to all of them today, but Zscaler will follow up. And thanks for answering that poll. All of that information you've requested will get sent out shortly after today's EcoCast. And with that, I'm going to keep things moving along. Exciting news. We do have our first prize to give away here. So if you have been listening intently, is that the word? Intently? Yeah. Okay. I got it. Continue listening. Hopefully your name is going to be the lucky name for the first $300 Amazon gift card. Again, you do need to be live and present here at the webcast to win. And the first winner of today's gift card is Tomo Kabahug from California. Tomo, big congrats, and we'll be reaching out after today's webinar to let you know how to claim that prize. And again, that handout that was called out there by Jacob, do check it out in the handouts tab. You can download it. It's a PDF, a white paper with a brief history of zero trust put out by Zscaler. Great document, and maybe something you can't find easily online. So make sure you grab that today so you have it in your repertoire for after the fact. And with that, let's keep things moving along. Our next team presenting today on Zero Trust is Rubrik. Our friends at Rubrik are often in the house giving some great security data. So glad to have you back. And today we have Joshua. Joshua Stenhouse is the field CTO of cyber resilience at Rubrik. And with that, I'm going to let you take things away, Joshua, and we'll go from there. The floor is yours.
Well, let's shoot from the hip. So we got 20 minutes and then some Q&A. And what I'm going to take you through is our perspective on zero trust and what it means for specifically the largest DR event that any organization is going to have, and that is ransomware attack. That's going to be the theme of this session, and basically everything that you're going to need to think about from a zero trust perspective to make that worst case scenario, the worst day probably in your professional career, a successful outcome and a successful recovery. So we start to go into a bit more detail. The key question that everybody has today is, if we get hit, can we recover? And not just can we recover, can we do it in a timely manner? And typically what you'd expect is that if any business is down for more than 24 hours, then serious questions are going to be asked. The impact is going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, and depending on your size, maybe tens of millions. And then you're also pretty much guaranteeing that you're not going to get away with it and that it's likely going to hit the press, because that's definitely not a technical blip after a 24-hour outage. And the lie that we all tell ourselves is that, well, my security is somehow better than somebody else's. And if you go back, if you think about the original inception of zero trust, where I know it's been said a million times and there's a million different interpretations, but the problem was that we had a trust model where we assign trust, a human emotion, where we're saying that we trust that that is going to be successful, that you're okay to do that, or it's going to do its job. And I would prefer to take the zero trust approach of, well, you can't trust that all your layers of defense will be successful, because that's a human emotion. You're trusting it. Well, I bought this. I picked the right one, so it must work. Because all we've seen since is that you can't trust that these layers of defense are going to be able to stop every attack. easy example. You can have the best patching mechanism and system in the world and patch every day for everything, but you can have a 0-day vulnerability and you only find out that you've been exploited for the last month once you get the patch. If you look at, for example, endpoint protection, the majority of all ransomware attacks today, they're encrypting at the hypervisor level. Your endpoint protection can't stop them. You can't trust that, well, I've got good endpoint protection, I'm good. And the interesting lesson that we learned is, first of all, that if all these layers of defense fail, then what you're going to have to rely on is backup and DR. So all your security teams, the entire business, lo and behold, the backups that nobody ever thought that they would need to use in a security event is now the last line of defense of your business. So it's gone from mundane, do we have a backup? Yes, to now the entire survivability of your organization is reliant on a backup or a disaster recovery technology. And unfortunately, these were not built with zero trust in mind. And so all that you see is an attacker will get in, they will compromise them, and then they will remove your ability to recover. Or even if you try and protect them in some rudimentary way, they're going to remove all your visibility and significantly impact your ability to recover. So the net result of what we see there is that you can't recover. So the first problem that we help our customers with at Rubrik, and that everybody needs to make sure that they're covering, whether you're using Rubrik or not, is quite simply, you can't recover what you don't have. And furthermore, you can't trust that everything is going to be protected and immutable from that attack. So the key things that we help with and what you've got to look at is not just your on-premises data, which is a typical, usual, already focus of having backups, but you've also got to make sure you're looking at your large unstructured data sources, which typically don't have a backup, so they're compromised by taking out the NAS and the storage that it's on. You also got to make sure that you have an out-of-band backup for anything running in O365, because you can go and Google it, shared responsibility model. You might think that Microsoft have a backup. They don't. It's your responsibility. And then also cloud native, the same. That they don't back it up. You've either got to use their own backup tools or your own. But just because you create a VM in Azure or AWS does not mean that it's now backed up. You are responsible for backing it up. So one thing that we do at Rubrik is we have a centralized platform for managing all of this from a central location. So you don't have to have a different interface and a different job per source or site. You just create global policies, push them out, and protect everything. So there's huge benefits there of just removing the trust, in that I don't trust that you have created an Azure account and configured backup. I'm going to do that for you. But also, you still got control of the data locality, so we'll help customers create immutable data copies inside the data centers and then stream data through to object storage in the cloud. But there's an interesting thing that we found here when it comes to zero trust is that as soon as you start taking backups and putting them on immutable storage in the cloud, or snapshots in the cloud and then replicating them, then at that point, those controls are pretty robust and that we don't see them compromised. And it's ironic because if you go back 5 years, everybody said, oh, the cloud is definitely a security risk. But because of the high focus on security and network and account segmentation, the only thing we've ever seen really exploited in the cloud are leaky buckets. Once you firm those up, which has pretty much been done, then the biggest problem you have today is likely not securing the cloud data. It's the opposite. It's securing data in your data center. So this is where you've got to start applying zero trust principles to your on-premises backup and backup infrastructure. So these are all the core capabilities that Rubrik has, and so I'm going to show you a Rubrik logo on here, but you can take these same principles and go and then apply them to any other technology out there, or as many of them as you can, to at least strengthen your approach. Because when I'm talking about zero trust data security here, I'm talking about the last line of defense of your business. So that is applying zero trust principles to your backup and your disaster recovery capabilities. So the first thing is, it might seem a little bit backwards, but you've got to make sure that your backup and DR capability is a physical appliance. And you might say, well, I thought everything was virtual these days. But that is actually a fundamental problem, because if you're trusting that your hypervisor is not going to be compromised, guess what? You're going to find out the hard way you should not have trusted that. Because it's only by ensuring that your backups are physically isolated from the hypervisor itself that you're giving yourself the first shot of saying, well, if all the virtual machines are encrypted, I know they haven't removed my ability to backup, recover, or the backups themselves. But you've also got to make sure that you're not running Windows as part of this stack. Because if you trust Windows, I guarantee then you will learn the hard lesson, because from 150 plus ransomware attacks I've been a part of responding to, I can tell you Windows is compromised in 100% of the attacks. The only thing I would trust the recovery of my business on is a secure hardened Linux, no Windows, but you're still only as secure as your last update. So you have to make sure that it's very quick and there's no downtime to upgrade that platform, considering that the survivability of the business rides on it. I also got to make sure that you're not trusting that it will have the horsepower to actually give you a speedy recovery. So it can't just be put in one box and run, because the larger the environment, the more boxes, the more compute, the more storage you're going to need for giving you the parallelism to both backup and recover and deliver a decent recovery time objective. Table stakes, you've also got to make sure that it's encrypted end to end and that you can perform your own key management. But the other big factor to consider is you can't trust the network, because if an attacker gets onto that network, which between the zero-day vulnerability, VPNs and VDI, even with MFA, I hijack your machine, you VPN in via MFA, and I'm on your network. So if the attacker gets on the network, you got to make sure that you're applying zero trust to the network access. So you got to make sure that there's no access to the underlying operating system, the operating system shell, or the backup storage storing the backups. So there's no browsable mountable file system. Because guess what? If there is, attacker's going to access it. So at Rubrik, we do this by just not using standard storage protocols in the first place. It's all encrypted remote procedure calls. So this means there's no way any attacker can browse, access, or mount the file system. But you've also got to make sure the backups are immutable. Now, for a lot of you out there, if you don't already have immutable backups, you need this yesterday. I guarantee if you don't have immutable backups, then you've got nothing to recover whatsoever in that data center in the event of an attack. At Rubrik, we do this uniquely in that we've had immutability since day one when we first came to market 7.5 years ago. So this means we now have 5,000 plus customers. Every single one of their backups is immutable without them having to lift a finger, because it's baked into our proprietary append-only file system. So it makes it ridiculously easy. But the other thing you've got to make sure is that the attacker just can't simply log in and start expiring the backups, because it's actually a myth to think that, well, an attacker is just going to encrypt the data. They'll actually just have the backup platform expire it. So you've got to make sure that you have mandatory MFA, that's table stakes. You've also got to make sure you have a local user account, because again, zero trust. You can't trust that your directory service is even available, and likely it won't be. So at Rubrik, we give you a local user account with built-in MFA. Can't trust your MFA hasn't been compromised. You also can't trust that a admin account has not been compromised. So we layer on retention lock so that even if a compromised backup admin successfully logs in and bypasses MFA, they still can't prematurely expire the backup. And then the last element of zero trust here in terms of protecting the data is you've got to make sure you don't even trust the time. The oldest trick in the book, if I want to expire all of your backups, all I've got to do is jump the clock. Backup platform will now say, hey, it's 2050, start expiring data. At Rubrik, we have a very unique way of solving for this. We never use the time for backup expiration. We use a monotonic clock. It's simply measuring the passage of time. It knows enough seconds have not passed, won't impact the expiration. Now, the last element of zero trust I want to cover on this slide is, and I see this all the time, especially from security professionals who should probably know better, is that not only are you presuming all of your security tools are going to stop the attacker, but you're also presuming that if they don't, that all of those tools are going to be available. And if any of those tools are running in Windows, or they're running in a virtual machine, or they're reliant on an external network connection, you have to presume that you're not going to immediately have access to them. So the other big thing that we focus on at Rubrik is that we build in all of our scanners in terms of looking at encrypted data, indicators of compromise, so that from this physically isolated platform, we're not trusting that anything else in that environment survives other than Rubrik. So we're also building in all of the scanners to identify encryption and malware to then give you the lowest recovery point and recovery time objective. And what we've seen is that it's only when you take all of these zero trust principles and apply it to your backups in your data center that you stand a chance of making a major attacker recoverable event within hours versus days. And if you think about the cost of being down for days to go and figure or rebuild all of this, that is an easy cost justification on switching to Rubrik alone, never mind replacing your day-to-day backup and recovery technologies, which is what we do to make all of this happen. But a few of the learnings that I want to give you, because you might say, well, we already applied zero trust in that we have immutable backups today. So if we've got immutable backups, then we're good, yes? Well, unfortunately, what we know from 7 years in the market of having immutable backups since day one is that that doesn't mean that you've got cyber resilience. Because if you look at the median dwell time, in North America, 5 days, international, 9 days, attacker will gain access. Next, they're going to exfiltrate your data, and you might say, I don't have sensitive data. Well, everyone does, if you've at least got employee and customer PII. And then they're going to encrypt your data, and if you're running a hypervisor, 60% of attacks are now at the VM level. So I'll stop there for a second. Your endpoint protection cannot physically stop the attacker encrypting it, especially if you're running, for example, a VMware, where you can't install your endpoint protection on ESXi. All the VMs are gone, they've bypassed it. And because they're doing it at the VM level, it's also extremely fast. You don't see encryption attacks take multiple weeks, maybe 5-10 years ago, but the modern encryption attack, within 5 hours, everything's gone. And at that point, the clock is ticking. Your business is down, it's costing you. And then you've got to answer some pretty serious questions very quickly, presuming that all of the tools have failed and are not available. And the first one is, can we recover? And this isn't just a case of ensuring your backup infrastructure, so your data is immutable, your backup data. You've also got to make sure the infrastructure around it is immutable. Otherwise, you've got no capability to recover it. And you might spend the first 2 days building that because you trusted that the hypervisor was available. You can't trust that the EDR has survived the attack. So how do you know what is the blast radius of what was encrypted? Which files, which servers, which virtual machines? Your data classification tooling has likely also been taken out. And even if you had it still running, usually you're only looking at the top 20 to 40%. So the next problem is what sensitive data was on that network and at risk from exfiltration. Next key problem is when do you recover to? How do you find a clean recovery point if all you've got is the backups? And if you have to recover them one by one, how long is that going to take and how are you going to ensure you don't reintroduce the attacker? And then finally, once you've made that decision, how do you automate it, reduce the downtime, and prove all of this in advance? So these are all questions that you're going to have to answer, and you're going to have to presume, and you cannot trust that you've got anything else other than your backup platform surviving at that point. And so this is where Rubrik comes in, and how we deliver cyber resilience and not just backups. Because all of the requirements that you're going to need for a cyber recovery is what we build. And that first, we start by making sure that you have an immutable backup platform, both the data and the management, physically isolated, built-in scanners, scale out performance to give you the speed on backup, throughput, and then scanning all of that data. We also then layer in encryption detection, and this is from the purview of backups. So we're not reliant on any endpoint protection surviving or running, which is very important because you've already got that. And what we're saying here is that we're not just looking for in-guest encryption, because that is only 40% of attacks today. We're also the only vendor in the world, and from a backup perspective, looking at VM level encryption events. Everyone else is still trying to figure out anomalies. And the problem with anomalies is that all you're going to get is a high false positive rate. So the other important thing is that you got to make sure that this baseline encryption detection, which is saying that I don't trust that my endpoint protection, one, will catch all of attacks, because it won't catch VM level, or two, itself has even survived the attack. So my baseline detection is from my backups across everything. And if that fails, then we're going to plug it into our SIEM. So one recommendation on a SIEM is make sure it's not running in a VM in your hypervisor, because otherwise that's gone too. Next, we can't trust that our sensitive data scanning capabilities have survived, or we can't scan the current data because it's encrypted. So you've got to make sure that you have built-in sensitive data discovery. This is something Rubrik does uniquely from the backups themselves, so they're immutable. Even after the fact of an attack, we can tell you what data was in those backups and therefore on the network. It's incremental forever, so first scan of 1 billion files, yeah, it'll take a week, but the next scan, only 3% has changed. So say, this is the new hits that we found. And one of the biggest value our customers get from built-in sensitive data discovery is that, one, it doesn't impact production because you're scanning the backups. Two, that means it will survive the attack because it's built in. And then three, the biggest value is using it proactively to mitigate the risk in the first place. Because if you only look after the fact, too late, the horse already bolted. Next big thing you got to watch out for is trusting that you're going to know the recovery point. Zero trust, you're not going to know. And so the next challenge is, well, how are you going to make that determination? And this is actually the biggest mistake and time loss that I see on all ransomware recovery events, is that you have to recover everything, scan, rinse, and repeat because you can't trust the backups. So the unique technology that Rubrik has is that we have built-in threat hunting, where it's basically an IOC sweep of the backups in their offline state. You can use our intelligence that is continuously updated. You can feed in your own YAR rules hashes. But the key thing here that you're doing is quickly identifying the clean recovery point and then quarantining the known bad so the attacker can't be reintroduced. And then finally, as a complete end-to-end workflow, we then give you an automated recovery. So we know the last clean backup per server, which is a combination of the threat hunt and the encryption detection. You can recover to production, you can recover to an isolated network or set of servers of your choosing, report on this. But the most important thing here is that then you can use this in peacetime to prove your ability to recover. But all we've spoken about so far is the technology. The other thing that you can't trust, if we take zero trust to a people level, is that anybody knows what to even do or has ever been for a ransomware attack before. So we don't just trust that your team are all ninjas and have done this 100 times, because likely they haven't. So we also give you a ransomware response team. This is not a chargeable extra. If you're a Rubrik customer for backup, you get this. And you're probably going to call them on a weekend. This is a team that have done over 150 recoveries. And the best way to think about them is a bridge between your backup, security, and IR. Because all of those teams are going to need to work together. This team will stay with you until you no longer need them. And the net result of everything that I've spoken about is that this fundamental question, can you recover from an attack? You all have these multiple layers of defense. And underpinning it is backup and DR technologies that are not meant for this use case. They're not built for zero trust. So when the attacker gets in, they're done. You can't recover. And even if you make the backups immutable, you're not going to be online within 24 hours. So the change of Rubrik is that we take zero trust. We replace backup and disaster recovery technologies. And we make sure if everything else fails, that this fundamental question of can you recover from a cyber attack within 24 hours, we turn that from a I don't know, from a fiction to a yes and truth. So with that, don't back up, go forward.
All right. I love that. Don't back up, go forward. Rubrik, thank you so much for being here. Always great to have you in the house. Joshua, thank you. I do want to just point out we have another poll up here. So what additional information would you like about the Rubrik solution? Are you looking for data sheets, personal demos, white papers? Are you already a customer? Throw in your response there because it's always super valuable for us, but also essentially the easy button for you, your shopping list, exactly what information you want. It'll get handed right on over to you. Now, we are a little bit tight on time today, so Joshua will not be sticking around for a live Q&A session, but any of your questions that have been sent through will get followed up by the team, so apologies for that, but not to worry. Of course, you will have plenty of information coming your way. That said, do keep sending in your questions for all of our presenting teams today. We do definitely have lots of Q&A lined up. I don't know. Lined up for you shortly. But anyway, send those in, be interactive, and there are $50 best question gift cards being given out for the questions. So you may just be a lucky winner today. And with that, let's keep things moving along. Our next team here on today's EcoCast is the team from HPE Aruba Networking. We have not one, but two fantastic presenters. We've got John Spiegel. He's the Director of Strategy and Field CTO, and Jay Tilson, Director of Strategy, Field CTO. This is such a great dynamic duo. Had them on for a few different EcoCast, MegaCast in the past, and I am so excited to have you two back. So I'm going to let you two take it away, and then I'll hop back on for some Q&A. And with that, take it away, John. Jay, have a great time.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. In this session, we're going to talk about using SSE to empower Zero Trust access. But before we get started, let me introduce you to your host for today. My name is Jay Tilson, and I'm joined by my colleague and my friend, John Spiegel. Together, John and I have over 50 years of enterprise experience running large infrastructure and security teams. We spent the bulk of our careers sitting in your chairs and have experienced the same daily challenges as you. And not just those technical challenges, but the cultural, budget and resource challenges also. Recently, we left our enterprise roles and moved to a company called Access Security, which is now part of HPE Aruba Networking. We made the move because we both believe that networking and security are marred with complexity. Stitching together a bunch of solutions that worked in the early 2000s no longer works in the world we live in today. Over the years, we have found that the old approach just created more challenges than solutions, and when deployed looked a bit like the game of mousetrap. We both believe there are better ways of doing it. So let's get started. The enterprise is undergoing the most significant transformation in history. Companies are adopting cloud like never before, with many now having a cloud-first approach. This means the legacy systems that always used to be on-prem are now being moved to software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service. Additionally to this, there is a huge rise in the number of IoT devices in use, with statistics showing that there will be more than 15 billion IoT devices connected to the enterprise infrastructure by 2029. Lastly, the pandemic created a massive shift in our workforce, with hybrid work now being the norm for more than 50% of our workers. This means our users, that their devices, our data and our applications are now everywhere. And this huge change requires a new approach when it comes to network security. We need this to keep access safe and fast, as our legacy solutions are really no longer sufficient, and more of them are being compromised. Statistics show that the average cost of a data breach now stands at $4.8 million, up more than 25% since 2022. But before we move on, let me just give you one more scary statistic. 80% of IT organizations found IoT devices on their network that they either did not install or cannot secure. So let that sink in for just a minute.
Thank you, Jay. Those were some sobering statistics. Why? The world has changed. Companies are embracing more and more technology, new ways of solving old and new problems. But there's a wrinkle. How we build, operate, and secure our networks hasn't changed much since the last century. Take the classic hub and spoke model. Designed for an era when you managed and secured your IT world out of a single data center. Your applications, your data, and even those crown jewels were protected behind the high digital castle and moat walls in the forms of firewalls and other physical boxes. This was successful in the time of centralization, but this is no longer the case. Applications, data, and now work is distributed. The assets of the enterprise are now strewn across our global digital landscape, and the threats, they've evolved too. Jay called this out, the scourge of ransomware, nation-state actors, and it seems like every week there's another well-known publicly traded company filing an 8K with the SEC calling out a material impact due to cybersecurity. So what is to be done? One response is to decentralize the castle and moat. So build more of them. Maybe smaller versions, but many more of them. This is really a replay of the hub and spoke design. The idea is to move your legacy-based security systems that used to run on hardware to cloud-based solutions. This is really driven by the firewall vendors who want to protect their revenues and continue to sell tin. The main aim here was to remove some of the burdens of keeping systems secure. However, in a lot of cases, this still meant backhauling internet traffic and the corporate network as well as the VPN back to the data center and leveraging some risky VPN solutions. Although the design was supposed to make things simpler to manage, in my experience, it's led to more complexity and cost. In other words, it's a vast increase in your management surface. More to manage and more to protect. Then there's SSE. In my mind, this is a solution built for today. It takes into account that applications, users, and now their devices are everywhere in our digital world. So let's talk a little about what people are asking for in a modern SSE solution. They want to build a solution that is built from the ground up with simplicity in mind. We all know that complexity does not make for good security designs. They want a single solution from a single vendor with a single UI and a single data lake, as well as a single reporting engine for all elements of SSE. They also want a solution to be built from the ground up with zero trust as part of its DNA. People really don't want a bunch of separated, acquired, or developed products that were brought together in a portfolio. That's too complex to manage and administer and often leads to frustration from IT teams and your customers. That's the employees that you service. They want a secure access from any type of application, whether they are an enterprise employee or those hard to manage third parties and contractors where installing an agent is impossible. They want to give access to all resources, including private applications, SaaS applications, and internet access from a single place and a single mechanism. They also want a solution to be built for today, that they know how this architecture works and how it makes their life simpler. They also want a solution that is built atop the cloud giants, which has all the features available everywhere rather than a solution that's built in a legacy data center on top of hardware. Doing so doesn't make for flexibility. It also doesn't scale to elastic resources that we need to meet today's needs. They also don't want to have their users going to different POPs or different services. Instead, all POPs must offer the same features and provide the best user experience possible. The architecture should also eliminate bandwidth problems. It should be resilient, redundant, and offer the best possible experience for all types of users at any time. And the most important is that it's critical for users always to get the fastest possible access to resources from wherever they are without the need to backhaul back to the corporate network and relying on VPN. Jay, over to you for more.
So you may ask, what are the benefits of SSE? Well, firstly, it increases your security posture, providing zero trust access to all of the services and applications. You eliminate your attack surface and reduce exposure. You also get to enforce least privileged access to all applications and services, including private applications, SaaS applications, and the internet. This will help you protect your business against ransomware and data loss. Secondly, you get to deliver the best experience possible to end users and IT administrators. So end users receive quick, seamless access to applications and services and data every time because of our intelligent smart routing across over 1,000 edges. Also, IT administrators can control access centrally and granularly, making it easy to secure the business from a holistic perspective. And lastly, you get to optimize your business with one solution for all of your secure access needs. You get to simplify and unify networking and security, and minimize complexity by reducing the number of point solutions you have in play. Additionally, you also get to save money by reducing the reliance on application-based security solutions, and you can also effortlessly scale with our cloud-based system. At the end of the day, our customers are key. At HPE, we believe in customer first, customer last. So let's look at some examples. Delta Dental got a jumpstart on their Zero Trust program by replacing 4 separate legacy VPN solutions with our SSE platform. Then there is UKG. They went all in with our unified SASE platform. This is a true combination of networking and security. And this gave them fast connectivity from every user and every device to every service with full security. And then there is VisionWorks. Their journey was about network transformation. They used our platform to help them move applications from on-prem to the cloud, with little to no impact on their employees. So let's dive a little bit deeper into our SSE solution. When you look at the SSE market, you will find that each solution really emphasizes one of these technology areas. It could be Secure Web Gateway as the company started there, or maybe Cloud Access Security Broker as that was the target market they were looking to be competitive in. But our situation is very different than that. We believe the future is about transitioning to a new security strategy based on Zero Trust. Our platform is designed to provide the resources required to perform a function and nothing more. And then we vigilantly watch for any indication of change and adapt access accordingly. We built our platform to deliver agentless Zero Trust network access for those hard to solve use cases of third parties and contractors, where it's really difficult to install an agent. We then added an agent to ensure full VPN replacement. And then on top of the same code base, we built out the other SSE features. We believe the future is about delivering secure access for applications, no matter whether they are in the cloud or in your private data centers. Services must be delivered the same no matter of the location of the user, the application, or the data, and along with security checks such as MFA and device posture. And we believe we have elegantly solved this for both your employees and those difficult to secure third-party resources. So let's just be clear. Our platform was built on Zero Trust at its core, and then we added the other SSE features to the platform. Secure Web Gateway for securing employees from internet-based threats. CASB for leveraging SaaS assets like Salesforce or Office 365. And for me, the critical element that people often forget, DEM or Digital Experience Monitoring. Giving visibility back to the IT and security teams that we lost when our users left our networks. So let's dive even deeper and look at how this all works. As I've just stated, our platform includes all the core functions of SSE. This means that access can be granted to the internet, SaaS applications, the public cloud, or applications hosted in your data centers, and all from a single user interface. So first, the user will request access. Note again that this is with or without an agent so that we can cover those hard to deal with third-party and contractor use cases. Next, the platform will auto-mediate the request. And unlike legacy VPNs, there is no pass-through connection, so users don't get an IP address on your network and cannot move laterally. The system will then prompt for MFA and automatically verify against your defined access policy. This is based on things like user, device, and application context to prevent any unauthorized access. Once everything balances, it will then broker smart and surgical connections, which, as I've said, will help prevent lateral movement. And as I've also mentioned, we have a single data lake for all of our services, which allows visibility across the whole platform. Please note that the platform continuously inspects the posture of the device and the user, and if anything changes, access will be adapted or severed within 60 seconds. So for me, this all adds up to increased protection against the bad guys, while significantly reducing your costs and your complexity. But most importantly, empowering your remote workforce.
Thank you, Jay, for diving deep into how SSE works. Let's move on to another topic. This one is about the concept in the industry of single vendors. Essentially, one vendor to solve all of your cyber challenges. We at HPE believe otherwise. There are tools we are really good at, and there's other areas where we believe that partnering is best. We believe in a concept called cyber mesh. Bring together the best of breed technologies and partner with them. Align closely to solve your cyber challenges without placing you in a walled garden where the vendor does an okay job, but not an amazing one, while also raising your costs. We at HPE are amazingly good at policy and SSE, but for identity, endpoint, SIM, and even SD-WAN, we believe you need to select your top-tier partner. In essence, we want you to embrace your inner Nick Fury and say, I'm here to talk to you about an Avengers initiative and build your cyber security team of heroes. All right, now for some advice on that superhero Avenger interview. When you're looking at SSE providers, there are some key things to consider because all of them have strengths and weaknesses. The best recommendation I can provide to you is to review them through the lens of simplicity. If a solution looks and sounds complex, it will be complex. It will also be expensive and time-consuming to manage. Therefore, first focus on a unified approach. Stitching together point products is a thing of the past. New software-defined solutions with integrations designed to provide visibility are the modern path forward. In order to stop a threat, you need to see it. A unified approach from day one gives you the advantage here. Next, it's about policy. If you have to manage a policy through several UI interfaces, you're going to make mistakes. We're all human, so focus on a solution which can help you reduce those errors and provide options for securing both modern and legacy applications. Deployment is another consideration. Here, look for flexibility. Demand options for both cloud and on-prem. If you're forced in one direction, ask for choice. Our businesses are not one size fits all. We need tools to align with the business, not businesses aligned with the tool. And finally, AI. It's a hot topic, and that buzz, it is loud. That said, AI can operationalize and up-level your security immensely. Make sure to ask about it. All right, we've talked a lot today about technology, SSE, cyber mesh, among many other things. But at the end of the day, there's a route for moving off the legacy castle and moat and moving to an SSE framework. And let's be honest, it's a journey. And like any journey, you need to plan ahead. Because this can be a long walk. And if anyone tells you otherwise, you need to question that. Why is this so? Well, we're talking about what were in the past multiple point products and replacing them with an integrated solution built to solve the challenges of today. Distributed applications, data in every corner of the internet, and now the distributed workforce. To do that, you need to consider your IT budgets, your resource budgets, your network, as well as your peers in either the network or security departments. You must seek alignment. If you do, and you take the time to plan your journey, you will see success and realize a better time to value. But where you start, that's up to you. It's about solving critical business challenges. creating outcomes for your company. So I recommend using this slide as a guide. From my perspective, I've seen a lot of success starting with an agentless third-party solution for access, starting to move off legacy VPN. As Jay mentioned, they are too risky. And according to a dark reading report, 60% of breaches at some point involve third parties. So gain a quick win with a ZTNA access using agentless. Secure your network and protect against lateral movement. Agentless access is a great place to start and can make for a quick win for your business. Then continue your walk. Look to secure your workforce with a technology called Secure Web Gateway. Or maybe it's about securing SaaS applications with a CASB. Or maybe it's about getting off that legacy VPN for all of your employees and moving over to ZTNA. The key here is to put one foot in front of the other. Start the journey.
Thanks for that, John. So I guess the question is, what do you do next? Why not reach out to one of our experts? Maybe you want to understand the value of this approach and use a value assessment. We will work with you in your teams to help you understand how you can get the best value from your purchase. We'll help explain what tools you can consolidate, allowing you to retire some of your old hardware. Or do you want to see more of the product? Why not take a test drive? And lastly, why not download our SSE adoption report? Learn more about why companies are making the move to SSE. It's really up to you, so now's time to pick your path. Thank you everyone for taking the time to spend with John and myself today. If you have any questions about using SSE to empower your Zero Trust access, please feel free to contact us. We'd love to talk.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation, you two. And just before we dive into some Q&A, I do want to make sure you all realize there's one more poll up here. The poll is asking what additional information you'd like about the HPE Aruba networking solution. Just like before, this is your wish list, your easy button. Plunk in your answer, and you'll be able to get anything you're looking for in terms of information upon the follow-up after today's EcoCast. And with that, John, are you ready to field some questions from our audience here today?
Yeah, let's take some Q&A. Let's go.
Okay, excellent. Okay, first up, this one is based on the Gartner SSE framework. There are quite a few products that are consolidated into one. Does this impact speed in which you ramp up a platform like this?
It can. Certainly what you're looking for, and if you remember the slide, the pyramid slide, what you're looking for is a business problem that you can solve, and diving in, understanding the various solutions on the market, and there are a number of them, and then applying one of those solutions or selecting a platform to move forward with. So what we see out in the marketplace is a lot of people are concerned about third-party risks. So that could be a contractor that you're leveraging for, maybe it's a legal aspect of your company, or maybe it's HR or something of that sort, where they need only access to 3 or 4 applications to complete their job. That's an area where we've been able to be very successful in because we have a very strong agentless approach. So they can leverage their own laptop, the BYOD solution, and then only have access to 5 or 6 applications. Once you solve that problem, then look at other areas to solve. Maybe it's VPN, maybe it's protecting your employees, your remote employees from the internet with a SWIG, or maybe it's protecting SaaS applications. It really depends on what you currently have in place, what solutions you're leveraging, where they are in their financial schedules, meaning is there still depreciation on it? Is there still support on it? And then trying to line all of that up in a journey. So moving to the SASE model as Gartner has proposed the framework, it is a process, it is a journey. It takes time and planning and resources to execute on.
Awesome, that's great. I've got a couple questions here about integration. So first is, how does your solution handle integrations with third-party tools such as SIM, SOAR, and EDR?
Yeah, so basically what we can do is we can stream the telemetry off the platform and stream it into the SIMS or whatever tool it is that you are leveraging. We do a lot of work with Splunk. That seems to be one of the more popular tools out there. But that said, we can essentially send it off as a syslog or send it off in a different format to fit whatever tool you're using.
Nice. And then to follow up on that, question here is, I see that you integrate with the larger cybersecurity ecosystem, with SIM, etc., but do you provide insights within the platform itself?
Absolutely. So the first area of insights is really around digital experience monitoring. So that's understanding the experience of an application. Is it performing well? And if it's not, if there's slowness, where's the problem? Is it the client side? Is it the device? Does it have a runaway CPU process or limited memory? We can help you with that. Is it the network, last mile, mid mile? We can help you understand that aspect of it. And then we can even go beyond that and start to get into some of the application insights. Is the path all the way to that SaaS application solid? But once it enters in their network, that's where the slowness happens. We can help with determining, is that the problem? The other side of the coin, the security side of the coin, we are coming out with some insights around threat hunting within our tools. So you can go in, start to understand, is there malware? Is there indicators of compromise? Those types of things. So either on that operations side for application performance or on the security side, we have you covered.
Amazing. Okay, we are kind of coming up on time, but I have a question here which might tie into a final call to action. Well, Alina is asking, are there any guides that can help with building out a roadmap to achieving zero trust?
Absolutely. So first of all, do some research on myself or Jay. This is something we write on a regular basis, not just in regards to SSE, SASE, or even the HPE solutions, but from a general approach of how do you leverage zero trust, and providing some guidance on that. So make sure to look us up. We both have websites. We are pretty prominent in writing articles out there. So start with that. The other area, we've seen really good uptake on accelerating zero trust journeys with our agentless solutions. So there's kind of a call out there to HPE. Our HPE website has some information on this as well. And then finally, I will plug a book from George Finney called, I believe it's the Zero Trust Project. It's very similar to some of the DevOps books, the Phoenix Project out there. Go read that. That gives you a really good high-level understanding of what that journey looks like, where to start, what are the things to think about. And then it also can help inspire other folks within your organization to really understand what zero trust is, what it can do, what are the limitations, and how to execute on a project. So George has been a very prolific writer and advocate for zero trust. So go check that out. And he has a follow-up book coming. I think it's going to be out this year. So that's another area I'd recommend.
Cool. Awesome. I love that. Great recommendations. Thank you. I am going to let you go, but any final, last words? Not in a spooky way, but in a good way.
Spooky way. It's not Halloween yet. We got a ways to go for that. I think the most important thing is to take a look at your portfolios and think about how networking and security can kind of come together. It needs to come together to secure our world today. For far too long, they've been standing alone, and we need those items, those technologies to come together and work together in a harmonious way for us to secure our digital future. So look and see how you can make that happen. Those are my final words. Hopefully
Awesome.
those weren't too spooky.
No, that was great. You covered for me there, John. Thank you. All right. Well, have a great one, and thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having us. Looking forward to the next one.
Cheers. Till next time. Alrighty, thanks for answering that poll and sending in your great questions. Again, do not fret. Any questions that went unanswered will be followed up upon by the teams today that have been presenting. So just wait for a little info to drop into your box there. Now, I do have another gift card to give away. So if you have been attentively waiting and you're excited, our next Amazon gift card for $300 is going out to Anthony Modster from California. Huge congrats to you, Anthony. And last thing, if you haven't already taken a little poke around the handouts tab there, do start taking a look. Check out the handouts. They're generally some great PDFs or links to some amazing data, some reports and information from each of our presenting teams. So in there, you've got from HP Aruba Networking, SEC, enable seamless and secure access for every user, device, and application from anywhere with the HPE Aruba Networking SEE. So you can grab that, take a look. And with that, I'm going to keep things moving along to our next team. We have got Okta, who was given a little shout out at the beginning of the day by Zscaler due to some of their integrations. We've got Isla Sharg, who is the Director of Solutions Product Marketing over at Okta. And with that, Isla, I'm just going to let you take it away. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar. I'll be giving an overview of some of the key findings from our 2023 State of Zero Trust report, and we'll also be discussing how some of the same principles of continuously monitoring your systems in Zero Trust should also be applied to identity. So as always, please submit any questions that you have in the chat, and the team will be monitoring and answering throughout my presentation. We'll also try to save some time at the end for some questions. Now, jumping into the report findings. So this is our 5th annual report where we surveyed over 800 security and IT professionals globally on the state of Zero Trust deployments as of 2023. And some of the biggest takeaways we saw was that Zero Trust has shifted from a thought leadership goal to something that's become a key part of an organization's security strategy. The majority of the organizations surveyed had already deployed a Zero Trust initiative. And for those that hadn't, there was a defined plan in place for them to achieve it in the next 18 months or shorter. And while many organizations are cutting budgets, Zero Trust initiatives are seemingly able to withstand those macroeconomic pressures that many of our different parts of our organizations are facing. And this can be because while everyone is forced to have to do more with less these days, the ongoing threat of cyber attacks are still on the rise. And so organizations are staying focused on hardening their defenses through identity-based security initiatives. And this is something that we at Okta love to see. The report showed that identity is now widely understood as imperative to a Zero Trust strategy. And in today's world, identity is the new perimeter, and it's something that we've been saying for years. And strong identity management is a fundamental element for an organization's success to operate and scale securely and confidently. Now, with all of that in mind, organizations are still challenged when it comes to adopting Zero Trust. Designing, scheduling, and implementing a Zero Trust strategy is complicated at best and involves many stakeholders, and every strategy is bespoke for each organization. And this is further complicated when you layer on the challenge of adhering to privacy regulations, addressing gaps in technology and people, and then, of course, cost concerns. Now, let's dive into that first key takeaway. The trend of Zero Trust moving away from thought leadership buzzword to fundamental security strategy. And that's reinforced by a few points in the report. So we saw a pretty large jump from a global perspective relating to organizations with a Zero Trust initiative in place. Back in 2021, just 24% of organizations had an initiative in place. But as of 2023, that number is at a solid 61%. And of that 61%, it seems like the sweet spot for organization size are those with 5,000 to 10,000 employees, where 3 out of 4 reported having a defined initiative in place. And the good news is that smaller organizations are really not that far behind. So organizations with 500 to 1,000 employees reported 49%, and organizations with 1,000 to 5,000 employees at 64%. And when it comes to where that adoption is happening, North America continues to lead in terms of initiatives already in place, but EMEA and APJ are gaining ground. Nearly all of the holdouts in both of those regions plan to adopt an initiative within the next 6 to 18 months. And the importance of identity is becoming increasingly more apparent for those leading these zero trust initiatives. In last year's survey, only 27% of global respondents said that identity was extremely important to their overall zero trust security strategy. But this year, that number's increased to 51%. And similar to overall zero trust adoption, EMEA and APJ regions may still be breaking through some perceptual barriers, with just 7 and 8% of respondents respectively declaring identity neither important nor unimportant. And further validating that identity is becoming a more important player in the world of security and zero trust, in North America, the number of security teams that own identity access management is at 73%. EMEA is at 50%, and we're seeing a more dispersed spread in the APJ region. But with increasingly complex workforces, including full-time employees, contractors, partners, and vendors, all of who need reliable access at any time from various locations, organizations worldwide are making great strides towards establishing strong, identity-backed zero trust security postures. And as a result, we're seeing organizations prioritizing MFA for external users, with 34% of this year's respondents having such security measures in place, and MFA for employees at a surprising 1% lower at 33%. And for those adopting more advanced identity security practices, context-based access policies and automated provisioning are less likely to have been implemented, but are already in place at 1 in 5 organizations. Now, back in 2021, companies were more concerned with setting up external users with SSO and MFA and tightening access policies. Now that most organizations have adopted these tools, that focus has shifted. So the highest priorities globally include implementing MFA for employees, securing access to APIs, and managing privileged access to critical resources. And only a small minority, and I'm speaking about less than 20%, said that these security initiatives were a low priority for them. So what's next for organizations around zero trust? Organizations around the world still have a ways to go, citing cost concerns, technology gaps, privacy regulations, and data security. And those are most often listed as the top challenges to enacting a zero trust security initiative. And cost is a recurring theme year over year, but the rise of privacy regulations is actually new this year. And concerns around stakeholder buy-in has actually diminished from previous years. And this is likely due to having more security experts, security organizations, and government agencies all validating zero trust principles. Now, let's continue on that thought of looking forward. And to do this, we need to continue to evolve the way in which we're thinking about identity. Zero trust is a framework that requires visibility and control across your entire security and technology stack. If you're familiar with John Kindervag's 5 steps to establishing zero trust or the CISA zero trust maturity model, there's always a major element focused on continuously monitoring your ecosystem. And that's to detect anomalies and threats, but also to make adjustments as the business evolves and changes. Those same principles apply to securing identity. It's a process, not a singular event. For a long time, logging in with a username and password was a way to establish trust between the application and the user. But in today's threat landscape, that trust formally established is frequently and consistently abused. Stolen credentials have become the norm, and some attack techniques don't even require the use of passwords anymore. Instead, attackers are launching automated attacks that bombard your environment, hoping that either a lucky guess or a frustrated user will give them the foot in the door that they're looking for. But there's been a number of identity-related breaches that have taken place after a user has been authenticated. And attackers are using several methods to steal a valid token and hijack the session, such as a cross-site script attack, installing malware, adversary in the middle attacks, session sniffing, and many, many more. And many high-profile breaches have used stolen cookies to impersonate a user and steal data, including British Airways. And according to the Verizon 2023 DBIR report, this type of attack is extremely successful and continues to succeed. Identifying suspicious activity before authentication and monitoring and verifying user activity after the login are just as important as the initial authentication. And it's also the best way to maintain a secure environment. In the pre-authentication stage, the goal here is to make it as difficult as possible for bad actors to get in, while simultaneously making it as simple and secure as possible for legitimate users to get in. At this stage of authentication, attackers commonly use brute force techniques, leveraging bots and automation to hit as many user accounts as possible, including brute force techniques like credential stuffing, where they're leveraging credentials compromised from other systems to compromise a new one with the knowledge that many users reuse credentials. Or they're using password spray, where a real username and commonly used passwords are attempted. Think password 1234, all of which is done in hopes of finding a match. And it's important to note that these failed login attempts can also prevent a legitimate user from getting in, which causes a loss in productivity because the users are forced to wait for an account reset. And best practices here include addressing brute force attacks. So they're often using known malicious IPs or using the same IPs to log into many accounts over and over. But with identifiable patterns like this, you can reduce the manual effort while proactively preventing automated attacks by automatically blocking those known malicious IP addresses. And with a lot of that noise cut down, your team has the cycles and capacity to focus on the unknown. And to do this, you should log suspicious events for follow-up. And with this data, you can more easily identify unusual user behavior that signals an attack. So things like logins from a country the user is not known to have traveled to, or logging in from a new and unknown device, or if they were originally logged in from a location, let's say somewhere in Wisconsin, but is now logging in about 20 minutes later from a location overseas. And it's in these cases where requiring additional authentication factors can help improve identity security without having to lock valid users out of their accounts. And this is best done with what's called user behavior context. And the nice thing is, it's not just improving your security posture, but if you were to present streamlined login experiences when a user is logging in at the same time, from the same location and secured device, using this pattern behavior, you can actually reduce the login friction and improve productivity. Now, MFA has been a leading tool to stop credential theft, stopping automated brute force attacks and social engineering attacks directly at that point of authentication at stage 2. But as MFA adoption has grown, adversaries have gotten smarter and have begun using more sophisticated attacks to bypass or steal authentication tokens. And this includes adversary in the middle attacks, where users are tricked into putting their credentials into a convincing but fake page, where an attacker will then capture that second factor, or push notification abuse, where a user is flooded with valid push notification alerts triggered by an attacker and eventually validates the prompt with a yes, it's me, out of frustration or overwhelmed or confusion. And in order to prevent attacks like these, you want to deploy phishing-resistant MFA that prevents attackers from getting around these second-factor authentication tokens. So this means ensuring users only connect to valid domains, including ones created by attackers to capture their second factor, responding only to valid requests from known and trusted parties, eliminating shared secrets like passwords or security questions. And again, speaking more specifically to phishing-resistant MFA, this means leveraging factors like hardware keys or biometrics. So things that only the valid user might have physically on them or might be themselves as individuals, all of which is done in order to validate that they are who they say they are. And because attacks don't just start or stop after a user's been authenticated, identity verification also shouldn't start and stop at authentication. It's becoming more common for attackers to hijack a legitimate session after a user is authenticated. And I gave you a couple of examples earlier. As an example, malware can collect session cookies on the device where an attacker can then use those to log in and move laterally. So to mitigate session cookie theft, you should only allow short sessions, have users re-authenticate frequently, and implement policies that require users to re-authenticate their session whenever a user closes or opens the browser, or maybe when they're attempting to access a sensitive resource. But these can negatively impact the user experience and can leave opportunities for an attacker to be successful, especially when users try to mitigate these prevention mechanisms. So best practices for securing sessions post-login that are not going to add additional friction for your users are sharing data across your security stack, such as from your EDR or MDM tools with your identity solution to detect potential threats sooner, continuously monitoring your sessions for suspicious behavior, so things like multiple password resets, new IP addresses, or attempts to access new applications or data, using automation to make immediate action depending on the anomaly, so things like requiring re-authentication or terminating a session, and analyzing data to uncover patterns and anomalous activity. Now, here's a quick recap of everything we just talked about. So when we're looking at that pre-authentication and authentication stages, there's a lot of information that you can use to evaluate risk before and as a user logs in. And we tried to visualize that a little bit here to show that these actions can and should continue past the point of authentication. So before a user logs in, using information available like their IP address and device as part of your authentication policy can reduce the risk of bots breaching defenses. And if you're collecting and analyzing user behavior or sharing risk signals with your MDM or EDR XDR software, you can reduce that risk even further while simultaneously reducing login friction for valid users. So a couple of examples, if I'm logging in at the same time every day from the same IP address and device, and my EDR software doesn't detect any malware, or my MDM reports that the device has a lock screen, I can then be directed towards a more streamlined login experience. However, if I'm attempting to log in the middle of the night, 1,000 miles away on an unfamiliar device or any one of these things, you can have a policy in place that has me jump through extra authentication hoops, or maybe even limits my access when I do authenticate. And at the authentication stage is where the phishing-resistant MFA comes in, so preventing attackers from bypassing traditional MFA. And at this post-authentication stage, don't stop looking at the user, their device, their behavior, or their session. Here, you should still be looking for things like, has the XDR software suddenly detected malware on the device and maybe indicated an elevated risk level? Is the IP address used in the session the same as the one the session started with? If not, that can potentially be a signal of a session takeover, or maybe the user just moved locations. But how can you tell? And that's when these other signals come in, like user behavior, device information, as well as analytics that identify patterns and anomalous activities. Gathering this sort of information not only feeds into the identity analytics, but allows you to continuously adapt to how trusted that particular session might be. And this evaluation happens in the context of that active user session. So here at Okta, we're calling this continued risk evaluation, where we're merging identity signals with external threat data and employing machine learning to more accurately assess risk. And in the context of identity, analytics can help find and mitigate threats more quickly. And the more data it can crunch, the better the analytics will be at detecting abnormal user activities, dormant accounts that should be deprovisioned, misconfigurations, or even detecting users that may have a higher risk of being a threat vector. And once you've assessed that risk, and this should happen at any one of these stages, it's important to take action to address threats while minimizing inconvenience for users. Ideally, elevated risk levels and policies automatically trigger actions, enforcing both authentication-related actions or any other action. So for example, pre-authentication, if your MDM or XDR detects malware on the user device, you can deny their authentication, or you can kick off a workflow that alerts your device security team that a user has malware so they can take the steps necessary to remediate it. And at the authentication stage, like we mentioned before, this could involve adding or subtracting factors for users depending on their risk level. And at the post-authentication stage, you could be looking for changes outside of the norm, such as an admin on a device without a passcode, accessing applications that they normally don't usually access, and you can then immediately log them out. So that about wraps up my slides here, but I do think we have some time for questions. See a couple in the chat. So first question here, how do these best practices for zero trust and identity align to the CISA zero trust security model? So that's a great question. CISA put out some guidance last year on transitioning to zero trust, but while this guidance is designed for federal agencies or industry partners of those federal agencies, it's really a model that can be applied to any organization. Under the CISA model, identity is one of the top 5 pillars of zero trust. And following that, CISA put together a maturity model with an overview of what each pillar could look like at each stage of their maturity model. Their maturity model has 4 different stages. So traditional is the first, then you have initial, advanced, and optimal. And based on the results of our zero trust report, it looks like customers are mostly in the initial stage with some forays into, advanced while mainly still in traditional. While some are still in traditional, but we're seeing the bulk of our respondents fall within that initial stage. We talked earlier about, I believe it was 33% had implemented MFA for employees and 34% for external users. And this is what leads me to think that most of the respondents fall within that initial stage. Another data point that I didn't bring up earlier is that 28% of our respondents had phishing-resistant MFA for their employees and external users, both of which are fundamental to that advanced stage. And that leaves about, I'm guessing around like 39, 40% who yet to implement MFA or phishing-resistant MFA, placing those organizations in that traditional stage. We also saw about 21% with automated deprovisioning, which is a key component of that initial stage of that system maturity model. And 21% also had merged and synchronized user directories, which is an element of that advanced stage. I would say that identity best practices that we discussed so far today primarily fall within that optimal stage or that most mature stage in that system model. And that's largely because, again, we're talking about the ideal state here. But if you want to know more about the identity pillar of the CISO Zero Trust Maturity Model, we actually have a white paper on it called very directly, Zero Trust, Understanding the Identity Maturity Model. And we'll put a link in the chat for you all so you can take a look. But hopefully that was helpful in answering that question. I think we have time for one more question here, but let's see. So we're in the early stages of our Zero Trust journey, and it can be hard to get agreement on where the investments should be happening. Any guidance on how to prioritize? So the good news is you're not alone. Most organizations, like I said earlier, are in that Zero Trust planning and adoption phases, and some have moved a little bit further, but we still see a good majority of them in that initial phases. Of course, we're an identity company, so it's no surprise that I'm going to say that you should invest in identity, but Gartner, Verizon, and other established organizations and analysts agree that identity-related attacks are increasing, and that identity is positioned to play an outsized role in security moving forward. Our Zero Trust survey showed that those top identity priorities for organizations are MFA, privileged access management for cloud infrastructure, and securing access to APIs. But when you're looking at your Zero Trust strategy, it helps to consider how investments will help you achieve other business priorities outside of just ones relating to security. So what goals does your organization have regarding, driving revenue, reducing costs through efficiency and agility, or improving your security posture? And at Okta, we actually help organizations who are focused on leveraging identity to drive revenue. This can be done with things like increasing sign-up or conversions, creating seamless omni-channel experiences, or simplifying onboarding of business and enterprise customers with our offerings such as social login, passwordless experiences, account linking, universal login, database and enterprise connections, and actions. And we also help reduce costs through efficiency and agility for use cases like automating employee lifecycle, making it easier to adhere to those pesky governance and compliance standards, and simplifying M&A integrations. And we do that with our offerings like IGA, PAM, workflows, lifecycle management, and highly regulated identity. And of course, we help organizations improve their security posture with use cases like proactively mitigating and remediating identity threats, stopping phishing attacks, and fraud prevention with our offerings like device access, identity threat protection, adaptive MFA and SSO, FastPass, attack protection, and credential guard. And I think that about wraps up today's session. We're just at time here, so I want to say thank you again for joining our session today. Hopefully you found some of these best practices helpful, and I really encourage you to take a look at our latest State of Zero Trust Security report, as well as that CISA Maturity Model white paper if you're looking for some more prescriptive guidance. And I hope I will see you all again in the next session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isla. Like you said, we are at time, so we're not going to be able to have some Q&A today, but thank you, as always, for all your questions, and the Okta team will be following up on those questions. Not only that, I do have one more poll here, so if you're looking for some more information from Okta and about the Okta solution, just let them know what you're looking for. And in the Handouts tab, there is the full PDF report, The State of Zero Trust Security from 2023. So if that has piqued your interest, you can actually pop over to the Handouts tab and download that now. And yeah, should be a great document to hold on to. I also have to say, Okta, you've got some great overall design elements to your slides, presentations, and documents. I'm a bit of a fan of nice type fonts, and you guys do a great job. So thank you for making it beautiful as well as useful and informational. Now with that, we've got two more teams presenting here on today's EcoCast. I am very excited to have the No Name team up in the queue next. And I'm going to introduce you to the fabulous Doug Steele. Doug is the Regional Vice President, federal level for No Name. And yeah, Doug, are you ready to take on this webinar, the Zero Trust Security Truth versus Fiction?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Well, I'll let you take it away, and then I'm going to join you for some Q&A. So if you're out in the audience, don't forget to ask some great questions, and we'll pose those to Doug at the end.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
All right. Okay. So, hi, everybody. My name is Doug Steele, and I am super excited to be with you today from sunny Colorado. And so, I want to start off, give you folks some insights about the area that is actually and pretty frequently overlooked when it comes down to zero trust, and that is APIs. So, No Name Security is a API security company, and that's what we specialize in. But before we start into zero trust and APIs, I think it's important to recognize that some of you may be suffering from zero trust overload. There is a significant amount of noise wrapped around this methodology, and it's very hard to determine if zero trust framework is applicable to your enterprise, and how do you know when you can declare victory and support an actual zero trust environment. So coming from the federal side of the world, as some of you know, we support some Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Defense, and federal civilian agencies. And over the last few years, the Department of Defense in particular, their CIO's office and Randy Resnick, who is the Zero Trust PMO over there, has developed an execution roadmap to help agencies prioritize their budget, time, and areas where they found gaps. So this roadmap points to 7 pillars of effort and prioritizes actions for the agencies so that they can get the best investment for their budgets while securing their data, mobile users, software-defined networks, cloud, and agencies and applications. So if you get anything out of my talk today, please take a look at this roadmap. Just because it's for the government doesn't mean that an enterprise can't use it as a bookmark. And a lot of agencies use this as their North Star and can measure how their enterprise is performing and where there are gaps. So a quick story on this, very early on when the document came out, I had a conversation with a CIO at a DoD agency, and they had just reviewed the document and told me, hey, I'm not sure this is really relevant, and it's real. There's a lot of hype wrapped around this. As a matter of fact, we're already doing most of this, but after a deeper review and a zero trust assessment from a third party, he pivoted, and he said that they were strong in most pillars, but they were lacking in some, including the application pillar. So that enabled them to focus their budget and time in areas that they knew was going to impact their agency. So I've asked the moderators to put a link to the roadmap. I believe having a roadmap and a way to measure yourself is key to finding gaps and to filter out the noise. I hope you find it useful. Okay, quick glance at the agenda. What we're going to talk a little bit more about is level set on the role of APIs and how they play in modern enterprises. We're going to cover how API security fits into the overarching zero trust narrative and provide you some ideas to take home in terms of best practices you can follow on your journey through zero trust. So happy to take any questions you might have. So please feel free to submit them during the presentation. And with that, let's get going. Okay. So No Name was founded because we saw huge changes coming to the security landscape and understood that APIs would play a major role. And this is because APIs are a key part of every aspect of digital transformation. This includes infrastructure, operations, data, customer experience, supply chain, and the list goes on and on. APIs have evolved beyond basic information sharing. They now play a pivotal role in critical activities across various organizations. This could be from controlling energy grids to facilitating million-dollar transactions. APIs enable seamless communication between interfaces, models, and databases in all kinds of applications, and including AI applications. I like to say that APIs are the language of data. And there's another point that I think is really important to note. The AI, artificial intelligence revolution, is being compared to the coming of the personal computer. It will impact every aspect of our lives, and protecting the infrastructure, the data, and the way content is presented by AI is critical. And Zero Trust gives us a framework to work from. So every single enterprise out there has thousands of APIs, and more are being developed almost on a daily basis to support business. At every stage of an API lifecycle, there are risks and vulnerabilities that come into the enterprise that you should be aware of. For example, when APIs are being developed, do your developers think about security? Do they understand API-specific risks? Are these APIs meeting your organization's governance requirements? And are these APIs well documented? As APIs move on through the life cycle, are they being tested before they go into production? Is there sufficient testing tools available? Are developers checking for business logic vulnerabilities, for example? And as APIs are being tested and then put into production, when it comes to your production environment, are your security teams aware of all the APIs running in your environment? One of the basics of Zero Trust is to never trust, always verify. So, how do you verify APIs and govern APIs that are interacting with your data sets? And finally, the question to ask, do you have the right controls in place to prevent attacks? WAFs, API gateways are very powerful tools if they see the entire API fabric. Most customers find that there is a significant of API traffic outside of these enforcement points. So some customers don't even have API gateways. This is an exercise essentially in attack surface management. So in this slide, we're just scratching the surface, the Zero Trust surface. But it's a strong example for the need of an enterprise to get better understanding of where they are in the Zero Trust process. Our friends at Booz Allen, for example, offer Zero Trust maturity assessments using best practices from the government and other large enterprises. Imran Umar runs their Zero Trust practice, and his team can help a CIO or a CISO find gaps and help prioritize efforts to secure them. All right. So, APIs. Yeah. So we're a little off, but that's okay. So there's a couple things going on here. So for, no matter how small and simple APIs can be, there are quite a few ways that they could be compromised. So this is a list of attacks coming out of the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, or OWASP for short. For example, the number one list that they have here is what's called the Broken Object Level Authorization, or EBOLA. And it involves issues with how user access to objects is controlled. So potentially this could lead to unauthorized exposure or alteration of data. And if abused, your APIs may return more information than they need to. So let's say an API is only supposed to respond with a customer name for an API call using a customer ID. But instead, the API returns information about that customer's address, credit card information, and other things that probably should not be shared. And just so you know, this is just the top 10 types of attacks. There are many other ways for bad guys to attack your APIs. And fortunately, many are successful. So, okay, maybe a question that you might ask me, hey, Doug, are there real life examples of API attacks? And the answer is yes. This is just a small list of documented events where an attacker abused APIs to steal information, steal money, or actual data. There's some big names here. The Optus attack, which is the first one I have listed here, is one that I feel is worth noting. So Optus is Australia's third largest communication company. The attack on Optus involved abusing APIs so that the adversary could steal personal records, including financial, of over 10 million Australians. That's more than a third of the entire population of that nation. And this breach was so impactful that Australia made emergency changes to their privacy laws. The impact from this event was huge. Okay, so why secure APIs? So you need to think about API security, especially when it comes down to zero trust. And it really comes down to three things. Number one, reducing attack surface. As I mentioned, enterprises have thousands of APIs, and you want to reduce your risk as much as possible. Number two, preventing unauthorized access. So APIs can be an entry point for attackers if not properly secured. Zero trust requires strict verification of every access request. And number three, certainly protecting sensitive data. APIs often handle sensitive data that needs to be protected. Implementing robust security measures ensures data confidentiality and integrity. And one other point, if we look at back to the document I mentioned earlier, if we look at the 7 pillars from DoD CIO's roadmap, you find that API governance and inventory management is a horizontal need. So in other words, API management is not just part of their data pillar, which is pillar number 6, but it is also referenced and found in pillar number 3, number 4, and number 5. So if we're following the zero trust framework, API governance, management, and security has significant impact in your security posture, and it also shows really strong return on investment. Okay, so as you heard, I'm sure you've been listening to quite a few folks, some big companies talking about zero trust. It's centered on the belief that organizations should not automatically trust anything inside or outside their perimeters. So instead, they must verify anything and everything trying to connect to their systems before granting access. APIs are fundamental in this framework, as they facilitate communication between different software applications, making them potential gateways to sensitive data and systems. So when we're looking at zero trust framework from CISA, which is represented in this slide, you can see all the different aspects that you need to understand and secure, from identities to data itself. But APIs actually show up throughout the entire framework, whether it's part of the identity authentication, device data access, SASE, threat protection for your application workloads, or even data encryption. Okay. All right. So what can we do? There are a couple things, and again, I believe getting a zero trust maturity assessment will help you. Call Imran over at Booz. But on the API side, here are my suggestions. Number one, make sure your APIs are properly authenticated and authorized. This is a bare minimum that any organization must do, not only to adhere to zero trust principles, but also to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data. And if you're implementing artificial intelligence into your environment, this is a must-have. The next one, Zero Trust requires continuous monitoring, and that includes APIs. So, we want you to track API usage, performance, and look for anomalies, which could be, indicators of compromise. And finally, conducting regular security checks. Keeping your APIs up to date will reduce the risk of a breach and help you align with Zero Trust principles. For example, you want to regularly update and maintain a comprehensive inventory of all of your active APIs. This inventory should include OES documents about the API's purpose, the data they access, and their security configurations. Once you have your API properly inventoried, you want to baseline what looks normal so that you know what normal looks like. And then you can leverage statistical analysis and in some cases machine learning against very large API transaction data in real time. And that will help you determine if something is abnormal. So with that, just a couple things about No Name. No Name's API security platform. We're really good at detecting, documenting, and finding anomalies that could be indicators of compromises. We work with small to very large enterprises, and so we can be deployed in any environment, whether that's on-prem or in your cloud. We're very good at working with your infrastructure, and we're certainly the leader of API security within this space. So thank you for your time. Reach out to me if you have any questions, and I will stop there.
All righty. Thank you so much, Doug. That was great. And I'm going to be fielding, or you're going to be fielding some questions from the audience in a sec here, but I'm just going to throw up a quick poll for everyone. You've seen this a few times today. If you are looking for some more information from No Name Security about their solution, plunk in your detail there of what you're looking for, and they'll get that to you right after today's event. Now, with that, I do have some questions locked and loaded for you. Are you ready to handle a few of these?
Yeah, I think I can handle a few.
Okay, excellent. I'm sure you're capable. Okay, so first one here is, what traffic source integrations do you work with, and do you integrate with SIMs?
Oh, okay, that's a really good one. So yeah, and that's really, in order for an API security tool to be successful, it's got to be able to integrate and work within your current infrastructure. So whether we're dealing with load balancers like F5, or if you're using the SSL broker in the Palo Alto tool, anything from that to Amazon to we have real mature integrations into some of the real big players within the API gateway space. So we're not an API gateway, so we don't compete with them. We interact with them and integrate with them. It's a really strong story. So, whether we're talking about IBM's Data Power or Salesforce's MuleSoft, these are superpower API gateways, and a No Name security combination is very powerful. That's a good question.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Okay, another question here. This one says, I heard that No Name was acquired by Akamai. Can you comment on that? I'm not sure if I want to go there, but
yeah. No, it's a great question. So Akamai is a superpower in content delivery and threat research, and a majority of the internet runs through Akamai's endpoints and environments and edges. So yes, the rumors are true. Akamai announced that they are acquiring No Name as a part of their security platform, which is, if you're listening to what I just said, that's really powerful. So if you're an Akamai customer, reach out to your Akamai team because they're going to have a new capability within the API space via No Name. And yeah, it's more than happy to support you folks.
Nice. Excellent. Well, good to know. Good to know. Question here about AI. This one says, should companies wait until AI is more mature before jumping into it with less secure or not fully tested AI technologies, or should they start taking some steps to do so now?
That's a really good question. And I think, I'm a security guy and have been, my entire career. I think AI is going to be instrumental in enterprises' ability to provide real-time services to their customers, be able to provide data analysis, pattern analysis. There's all kinds of benefits to AI that you can't really sit on. But security has to be a part of that discussion. And in my world, as I mentioned very early on in this discussion, APIs are the language of data. So if you are looking at artificial intelligence that will be reaching into and accessing your data sets, your customer information, your intellectual property, and automating and providing real-time content delivery, which is super beneficial, you better make sure that there's a security person sitting there with you talking about how they can help you. And there's multiple companies on here. I'm a former Palo Alto guy, and I think Palo Alto has a really strong story as well. But you really need to have you really have to have security not only on providing content integrity, but also making sure the infrastructure supporting and running your AI is secure. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of my opinion on the subject.
No, I think that's great. Gives some context, and I think it's it's evolving too, right? We don't want to sleep on it, but we still want to keep a mindful eye of how we're really doing that implementation before we just kind of AI's got it.
and your competition is using it. They're using it today. I've had some discussions about AI is going to take away jobs from people. And I would argue that people that are using AI will take away jobs of people that are not. So this is the impact of AI is very similar, I think, to the coming of the personal computer. It's going to change everything. But it really is important that an organization is implementing and thinking about security as they're doing it. And the good news here, back to zero trust, is that there is framework to help you do that. And that's something I believe. So good question.
Excellent. Okay, so I've got a couple questions here about APIs. So first one here is saying, can API security replace other forms of security? Can other forms of security such as firewalls, IDPs, antivirus replace API security? Or is it a necessary element of total overall security along with other methods? So I think they're kind of asking, can one be one or one be the other, or does it kind of all need to work together?
Yeah, a lot of the times, so the answer to your question, today, API security isn't really coming in and replacing anything. Most of the time, the discussions that we're having with our customers are wrapped around, show me my API landscape. I've got an API gateway, I have WAFs, I have, a next generation firewall. I've got a really strong SASE solution, but I can't tell you that I know that, I've got full visibility into my API environment, and that's where we come in. So, in my 2 years here at No Name, I have not been in a situation where we are replacing something else. We're just making the return on investment into those other tools better, especially API gateways, especially next generation firewalls. And, someone had mentioned SIMs. We do integrate with SIMs, SOARs, the being able to access and run playbooks based off API events is really super powerful. I do think, and I think there are companies like Akamai that recognize that this is a gap, not only in their customers' infrastructure, but in their current offerings. So I think you're going to see a consolidation of API security as we go into the next few years.
Excellent. All right. We are kind of coming up at time here. So I'm going to say final question is just where should people go? What should they do if they do want to take some next steps or discover no name security a little bit further?
Yeah, nonamesecurity.com. Certainly take a look at our webpage. It's super strong. Probably over the next few weeks through June, you're going to be hearing more and more about Akamai and the no name story. Which is super powerful. Akamai has an excellent web application protection platform, and so you can take a look at that as well. And especially if you're a customer of Akamai already, Akamai is a pretty big company, and they offer some pretty world-class services and security. Access. That would be my next thing is access your Akamai team, and we can certainly get in there and help you out.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. I will let you go, but great to have you on and definitely hope to have you back sometime soon.
Awesome. Thanks for the time.
A pleasure. Take care. Alrighty, so if you haven't already, there is in the handouts tab an awesome handout from No Name. It was referenced there earlier in Doug's presentation, but the DoD Zero Trust Capability Execution Roadmap is in there. PDF, very thorough, lots of great information. So definitely check that out and give it a download. And with that, we are moving into our sixth and final presentation. Doug also gave a little aside to Palo Alto Networks. So, it's great to see so much collaboration and cross-promotion within this world of tech and within Zero Trust. So, we've got friends going from one place and going to another. And so I've got from Palo Alto Networks, Jason Georgie, and he is going to be filling us in on some great fact or fiction about Zero Trust. And he is the field CTO from Prisma Access. I will be joining for some Q&A. So again, last chance to get those questions in. And with that, I'm going to let you take it away, Jason. And the floor is yours.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jason Georgie, field CTO for Prisma Access and SASE here at Palo. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me. You've heard a few conversations already around Zero Trust, fact versus fiction, however we want to position that. But the reality is, when we start talking about Zero Trust and what we need to do and how we need to solve the problem, it really comes down to one goal, right? And let's keep this simple, right? You've heard a lot, but the whole idea of Zero Trust is to just prevent unauthorized access to resources. That's it. That's really all it's meant to do. Now, there's a lot that goes into this. And as the complexity of the how becomes, a little more evident, just use this as your grounding statement, right? This is the ultimate outcome. This is the whole idea that this was designed to solve, is there were users, however we define that, right? A human employee, human non-employees, devices. So any consumer of a digital resource that have access to these resources. How do we prevent that from being done in an unauthorized way, right? Gaining too much access or just improper use once access is obtained. So these are the things that we want to be able to solve when we go down the path of a Zero Trust strategy and how we want to adopt and adapt our framework to making that a reality. So look, when it comes to establishing this framework, there's some challenges we need to solve. Right. And we're all facing these in some way, shape, or form, maybe not all 6, right? We may have 8 or 10, but we've all got these to deal with. Overly permissive access. Think about how we built networks back in the day. The whole goal was to get packets flowing, get users accessing their applications. The easier it was to access, the better we were doing our job, right? Security was an afterthought, and that obviously built in transitivity. Unfortunately, that transitivity is now the problem that we need to solve for. large blast radius. Once users get in, they just have too much access, right? The ability to move laterally across networks means if I can get to a system, then the damage I can do, I can just extrapolate across an organization. So how do we contain that blast radius as much as we can? Stolen credential reuse. We talk about things like how an attacker thinks, and believe me, brute force is still out there. But at the end of the day, if I'm thinking like an attacker, I'm going after the keys rather than trying to break in, right? And that's what identity theft and abuse is all about. The keys are already there. It's just a matter of obtaining them to get to my goal. Insider threat. It's kind of funny. I've seen the insider threat idea talked about, but when it comes to implementing zero trust strategies or certain products that support a zero trust architecture, like zero trust network access, they don't always account for this particular fact or this item, right? Which is, if I'm an insider with privileged access, what's going to keep me from doing malicious things to my systems and my data? Inconsistency of security. This is one of the biggest problems that face any CISO or CSO out there is we've got security tools all over the place. Are they doing the same? Is my posture, policy, and reach consistent? Because where I have gaps or where I have a degradation in policy or security, that's where my vulnerabilities lie. And then finally, on managed devices, we think about how all the tools we want to put on a managed device. Well, we do put a lot on a managed device. It makes them far less of a problem than the unmanaged device that has access to many of the same systems, right? So this is the thing that we really need to start solving for in a much more aggressive way. So let's do some reset though, right? I want to make sure that as we go through this discussion, or I have this discussion with you, that we're all on the same page, right? Because a lot of terminology right now is confusing. Zero trust network access. SASE is part of this now, Security Service Edge or SSE, and there's a commingling of a lot of this terminology that I think we just kind of need to get straight right off the bat here. Zero trust is a strategy, it's not a product. I don't care who the provider out there is or how broad of a scope and portfolio or capability they have. They are not a zero trust solution, right? They can be part of the zero trust architecture. They have zero trust enabling solutions, but one vendor, no matter what they do, can get you to a true zero trust architecture. ZTNA itself is a product. And I call this out on purpose because there are some in the ZTNA space that do talk about we can get you to zero trust. That's just not possible if that's all you're doing. And I'll show a relationship here momentarily around that. Applying zero trust is up to your risk outcomes. And I mean this very sincerely. Zero trust is a large strategy to start to get your hands around. And with that, there are a lot of components to it. And a lot of those components don't necessarily apply to every single resource in your organization. You're going to have critical users and critical applications. You're going to have critical data sets, some more critical than others. Then you're going to also have pretty benign users, pretty benign data sets, pretty benign applications. How much rigor, how much of the zero trust type architecture do you need to apply to everything? Again, that's going to be up to you, your risk, and those risk outcomes. It doesn't have to be a single approach for everything. And this is incredibly important as you start to strategize around what you really want to do with your zero trust architecture. Because, one of the things that I hear a lot is, hey, I need a place to start. And that can become an overwhelming thought process when you think of all of the things that zero trust has to touch in the environment, especially just around, different components around business processes and things like that, which I'll talk to momentarily. But you need to figure out a way to kind of chunk this up, make it into more of a bite-sized piece that solves your most immediate or critical risk first, and then figure your way out. And I'll describe some strategies around that moving forward. And then finally, not all ZTNA solutions are created equal. And I say this purposefully because some of those vendors out there that will talk about we can get you to zero trust or we've got a zero trust product for you, it depends on what you want to define and what those risk outcomes are around zero trust. So as I go through how I look at zero trust, both from a former practitioner perspective and now on the provider side, maybe you can kind of see where I'm going with why you need to know the differences and why that would be important to your organization. So let's look at it this way. We want to align outcomes, right? This is not about features. And anybody that kind of gets you down the path of, well, your zero trust product needs to be able to do this particular thing because that's a feature of what we do. It's less about, okay, what are we actually trying to solve with that feature, right? So now let's look at this from an outcome perspective. What are we trying to do? We're trying to reduce organizational risk, right? That whole thing that I opened up with, we're preventing unauthorized access to resources, right? By preventing unauthorized access to resources, we're reducing that organizational risk. So what's the step tier down from that? To reduce organizational risk, we need to keep those digital resources safe. Okay, seems pretty simple. Now, how do we do that? We want to prevent data from getting into the wrong hands primarily, but then once data or access to that data is granted, prevent harm from happening to those resources. So that's actually once entitlements are granted, how do we ensure that those that are entitled to that access don't do harm to those resources while that access is granted? So here are some things that we can look at. That's why I'm kind of shouting this out right here, right? We want to make sure that users get no more access than what they need to do their job. Pretty simple. But this is not necessarily as simple of a concept as others would make you think. When we talk about least privileged access, that is conditional access based on context, and it has to be adaptable, right? So if I'm sitting here with on a managed device in a known location, I have full access to my entitlements based on policy. If something in that changes, right? Another device of mine is coming in at the same time from another location. That's a problem. Or even if I take myself and my managed device to a high-risk location, should my entitlements change based on that location? Potentially. Like if I'm going to a high-risk area where tampering and spoofing is a huge problem, we need to be able to mitigate that risk. So it's got to be adaptive, and it's also got to be attribute level. So maybe my full access at times changes to read-only access given that condition, or upload only or download only, rather than being able to do everything with that app. Always know the condition and context of users accessing applications and data. This has to be a continuous verification process. It can't be a set it and forget it or allow and ignore. It's got to be something that is continuously looking at changes in the behavior and or the condition context of both the requesting user and the device they're coming from. Minimize the impact. We have to assume breach or intrusion, right? And so if we're assuming that, how do we mitigate, again, reduce that blast radius, right? If somebody's going to get in and we have to assume breach is going to happen, how do we make sure that that's not going to go further than where that initial infection or that initial issue occurs? Uniformly protect data. This is pretty important. If we have varying tools supplying various levels of data protection, we're going to have inconsistency, right? And therefore, are we even covering everywhere that data resides? Probably not. So how do we get more consistent about what we want to do and how we do it to make sure that we've got that uniformity where and when we need it? And then finally, that any application we choose is part of our zero trust architecture, right? Certain tools out there that are providing zero trust type services really only handle certain data flows, right? From a client to an application or a server or a host. What about the other direction, right? What about service initiated traffic? Shouldn't that be part of your zero trust architecture as well? I mean, either that service is accessing a critical user's device or is shuttling critical data from somewhere to that device. We need to be able to account for all of it. We can't just send that over the internet because one of our tools doesn't handle that properly, or keep a legacy non-secure approach around that is going to handle that traffic specifically because one of our new tools isn't able to handle it. So it's just making sure we take a more holistic approach to how we want to do this and do it in the right way for our organization. All right, here's the relationship I talked about before. There's a lot that goes into zero trust that I'll get into, but let's start with kind of where a lot of the technology providers in this space are focused right now. Zero trust network access. Now, if we want to look at this, zero trust network access, as well as some of these other capabilities I'm going to talk about here, are really defined capabilities by Gartner, right? They started in essentially June, July of 2019 was ETNA, August of 2019 created SASE, and on we go. But the idea is there's a relationship here, right? And they can't all be necessarily deemed the same. So ZTNA is part of an SSE, a security service edge. But to get there, you also need components such as a secure web gateway, firewall as a service, and CASB. So an SSE contains all 4 of these components. Now, when we want to go the next circle out, what is a SASE? It is what an SSE contains plus SD-WAN, right? So it's that simple. Now, if we want to take a look at what is the bigger picture, the bigger topic of discussion here, which is a zero trust type strategy, this includes so many more things, right? We're talking about application identity, ensuring that the application is aware of itself and its own components, and making sure that other applications that shouldn't be talking to those data streams cannot, right? And making sure that that identity is sound. Identity and IAM from a user perspective, right? How we're identifying, authenticating, and authorizing users as part of our environment. Continuous business process, which I'll touch on momentarily. Organizational change management. When we go down the path of saying we're going to start restricting access or cutting some of these legacy access capabilities off in favor of a more secure approach, people need to be told, right? They need to know that we're undergoing a change. There's a lot to this. And then policy governance. All of this all of this is meant to actually achieve an outcome, but there are interested parties, right? We've seen changes now from the federal government of the United States saying, zero trust is a architecture that will help prevent certain breaches or mitigate the impact of those breaches. As we've seen with so many other things that start with the federal government, you can rest assured that other, interested parties are going to want to see more around zero trust as well as they go. So what does that start to look like? So now when you look at all of these circles combined, right, you can see that there's not one single product out there that can truly get you to zero trust. Everybody operates in components of these, right? Including companies that have breadth across their portfolio, even like Palo Alto Networks. We don't claim to be a one-stop shop when it comes to zero trust. Nobody should be, right? Because there's so much more to it that all of us cannot do ourselves. So let's talk a little bit more about that continuous business process in the world of zero trust. We need to understand classification, right? How do we classify crown jewels and critical assets, right? So crown jewels, those are the things we cannot lose as a business, right? And as technologists, we don't make that call. Same with critical non-crown jewel assets that are meant to keep the business running, are secretive, are very restricted in terms of access. These are also very critical things. But we as technologists, again, we don't make this call. The business does. There is a Venn diagram of how zero trust needs to operate within a business. One circle is your technology teams, right? And that's IT, information security, everybody that's touching and responsible for implementing the enforcement and GRC of what's going on. The other circle is the business itself. Those business unit leaders that are saying, from my business perspective, I can't lose this. This intellectual property is the most valuable thing to my organization. These critical digital assets are what I deem them to be, right? They're the ones that make the call of what is critical. We as technologists know where they are, and that's where that overlap then in the Venn diagram happens, which is to say, business tell us what we need to secure. We're going to tell you how we're going to go about securing that. And that's where we're meeting in the middle to make sure we're achieving the same thing in that overlap right there. Now, once we get there, we've got things like application or asset lifecycle management, which is to say, as we tag and classify these assets, what is the reclassification process as our business changes? And that could be so many different things, right? New products that we introduce to market, M&A and divestitures, global growth as we expand from potentially a North American company into Europe. We've got a whole new set of compliance standards, GDPR and other things, worker councils and things like that we are now accountable for, and two, reporting on certain privacy elements, right? And that's right into the next thing, which is who are our compliance stakeholders, who's going to be responsible for reporting or verifying what we do there and reporting that we're actually there in terms of what they need to see. So this is something that, again, a single technology product isn't necessarily going to do, that's also charged with the enforcement of the zero trust strategy itself. Let's look at this now in terms of a practical application for a lot of this audience, right? Because you're hearing from a lot of providers here, including myself, that provide zero trust network access or zero trust architecture type solutions to protect that session, right? Prevent the unauthorized access between users and those resources, and then make sure that's part of a broader overall strategy. So let's look at access specifically. When we do this, we want to ask the question, what about ZTNA's default deny policy? Right? That's the whole idea of what ZTNA is meant to solve. So the software-defined perimeter architecture, reverse proxy type architectures are stated to, we're going to cloak internal assets, and we're going to authorize access based on policy. Right? So how does that kind of look? Well, we ask a couple of questions at the end of the day. Which is who? Right? This is the context that we try to gather. So let's just say everything stops. User wants to access a critical resource, crown jewel, or application, however you want to set it up, whatever you deem is that demarcation between, where we need to put some stopgap measures in, fine. So everything stops. User wants to access that resource, things stop, default deny. Now we begin the explicitly allowed type posture, asking the question of who. Who are you? Full user and requesting device context. I want to know who you are, where you are, what's your authorization status, conditional group membership. What are the things I need to know, good or bad, right or wrong? I don't care yet. I just need to know the full context of you and your device. Managed, unmanaged, patch levels, things like that. Okay, now that I know it, now I've got all the information that I need to know about you. Now I'm going to ask what? What do you actually want to access? Is this part of your entitlements? If it's not, then the conversation's over. Have a nice day. If it is, now I want to apply access levels based on that context I gathered by asking who around you and your device context, right? So again, you're sitting in a known location on a managed device. You get that full access that you're requesting to that particular application. You take your same device and yourself to the Bahamas on vacation. Your organization says that's a high risk part of the world. We want to restrict that access down to read only or download only if you're accessing an HR app and you're trying to pull down some benefit PDFs or something like that. But it needs to be adaptive based on that context. And this is again a difference in least privileged access. We're not talking about a single user to a single application via fully qualified domain name, but then once that DNS name is accessed and looked up, whatever access is behind that is what you have. We're talking about, okay, we're going to grant you access to that application if you get it by policy, but then based on the user condition, how much are we going to restrict that down to make sure that you only have what you need to keep our data and information safe? But now the final question that needs to be asked, right? So understanding all of this and everything I just walked through, we've got, implicitly denied, explicitly allowed traffic at this point. So nothing's visible, everything's cut off, we're accessing things by policy. Then the logic is only bad things can happen over allowed access, right? Because otherwise it's denied. So if you're getting to something, only bad things can happen over allowed access. So we need to ask ourselves a third question when it comes to this, which is what's inside. This is extending the principles of zero trust, preventing unauthorized access into the session itself, right? And it's not about the tunneling protocol. Like this comes up a lot. Hey, it's IPsec versus SSH versus TLS. It's less about the protocol itself that's getting the user to the information than what's actually happening within the session itself or at the end of it, right? Making sure that we can provide security scanning of that content once that access is allowed. That's how you're going to mitigate certain things, right? Why is this important? Well, I hit on this before. Credentials are a key attack vector today. It's so easy. It's thinking of a brute force attack from the outside versus stalking an organization or multiple organizations on LinkedIn and starting a campaign, right? Let's look at it that way. And especially with the tools of AI, the ability to do social engineering and successful and sophisticated spear phishing techniques are on the rise. So it's quite easy to just say, let's go after the keys, like I said before. So before we get there, right, what we want to talk about, insider threat. I talked about this before. Users gain access to certain applications and data sets because that's what they do to do their job. Now, if that's an insider, a malicious insider, perhaps from a competitor or perhaps going to a competitor, how do you mitigate the risk of when they use their credentials that they have entitled access to these things that they can't do harm to your systems or resources, right? We need to be able to mitigate that. Unintentional damage. This is where we start to get into the credential theft. A good user doing a bad thing. They get one of those social, engineering spear phishing emails. They click a link. Then they succumb to an MFA bomb. Now, you may say we've got procedures and processes in place to mitigate that. Depending on the size of your organization, this attack vector could be 200-300 people. All they need is one or two to click that link initially, and one of them to succumb to that MFA bomb. So casting a net of a few hundred people, I need one set of credentials. It's a lot easier to achieve than you think, and now that's where credential theft does happen. So again, this is using credentials that have access based on the role of that user to now be used against you. And let me equate this to another way, and a lot of the way the SSEs out there are kind of comprising their systems. You've got it's a relationship, right? Again, I'm a user with my device. We've got the internet, and we'll call that B. The logic out there is to protect A from B, right? I access the internet, put some URL filtering policies on there, and then block threats on the traffic on the way down. So, okay, so we're protecting A from B. The assumption then is if I want to extend this relationship to C, which is an internal private application, because my device is free of threats and safe, that there should be no harm done to that internal resource when I go to establish that session. So all I then need is a broker. I just need an access broker to say, who are you? What do you want? If that's granted by policy, off you go. We're trusting you for the most part, or trusting the session for the most part, because your device is clean. There's no malware on it, etc. Where that logic does fall down is in the event of credential theft or abuse, right? So it's not just about protecting A from B, the internet, and its threats. It's about protecting C, a private application on the inside, from a malicious A and a malicious insider, right? Or a victim of credential theft. So just a different way to look at things to make sure that we're handling this in the broadest way possible. So now let's cap this off with where I was before. I went through how those outcome step tiers type go. When we say users need no more access than what's needed to do their job, truly least privileged access, attribute level access given the condition, the user context. We talk about things like knowing that condition all the time. It's continuous verification and validation, right? Continuously authorizing access and session behavior, not a set it and forget it, allow and ignore. Those don't cut it in this day and age. When it comes to minimizing the impact of that assumed breach, continuous security scanning of even private app traffic, right? That's what's going to mitigate the impact of credential theft and abuse from packaging up malware into a PDF and uploading it, because I have the ability to do so by policy. If we have a tool in line looking for that behavior, looking for files that they can inspect and stop, that's what we want to be able to do. We talk about that uniformity, protecting all data, right? That's making sure we have a consistency around the tooling we're doing to enforce these policies, right? Enforce the security inspection and scanning to be able to have that regardless of whether the data sits in a data center, a colo, a cloud VPC, SaaS environment, or the web itself. And then making sure we're protecting all applications. All applications, all data sets that we want to be part of the zero trust architecture and policy should be. There shouldn't be exclusions based on tool limitations. It should only be up to you and your policy what you exclude from that realm. So I want to thank you for your time and listening to me today. I want to go ahead and open it up for some questions, please.
All right, Jason, that was fantastic. We are running a little bit short on time, so I don't know if we'll have time to go through a bunch of questions, but I would like to ask kind of if someone wants to get started or take some first steps with Palo Alto Network, where should they go? What should they do? Or is there some sort of a takeaway you want to leave with the audience today?
Yeah, I think when it comes to where you start, it's everything I talked about can be overwhelming if you don't have a place to start, which is why I always say look at this in terms of what you need to protect the most first. So work with the business to understand what those crown jewels or critical assets are. You'll know where they are because you're the technologist that needs to put the infrastructure around them. But then that's where you start looking at how granular you want your policies to be. Look at it in terms of concentric circles, right? That center bullseye is your crown jewels. That's where you want the most restrictive policy, your default deny to start, and then only allow based on those that are authorized to access traffic, or their traffic is authorized, granular tight policies, then work out to the next circle, which are your critical non-crown jewel apps. You've already got the framework, you've got what you need to do from how you protected the crown jewels, just extend that out to that second circle. Then your important but not critical non-crown jewel apps, right? And that's where you might say, I don't need quite as tight of restrictions. I could actually let traffic flow to these things and then cut policy back, tighten, ratchet it down as we go based on what I'm seeing in terms of user behavior. And then maybe that last circle out there is everything else. Benign users to benign applications, we don't necessarily need this level of control. Because if you try to put something super tight and secure on everything in your environment, it's going to fail. It's going to create a terrible user experience, and the business is going to say back off. You're breaking the business. It's not going to work. So just go to try to achieve what the security teams, security leadership, and the board of directors wants you to secure primarily, and then work your way out from there.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go for today, but great to have you on here, and I look forward to the next time we get to hear from you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty. Well, that was a fantastic way to wrap up the day here on today's EcoCast. I am excited to, have taken in all this info. I really, truly kind of nerd out on all this stuff, so I hope that you also have enjoyed it. I've got a question in the audience about getting a copy of slides. You will be able to access this entire video recording after the fact, and that'll go up on our YouTube channel as well. So check it out. But until then, we will be sending some follow-ups as well. Now, that said, don't run away. There is a little bit more excitement before you take off here. And first and foremost, I want to mention the handout from Palo Alto Networks. Right now, there is a link in there, and it's actually going to their website where you can check out their new Precision AI tool, which is super cool. And I don't know how, but they managed to get Keanu Reeves for the product trailer. So it's pretty fun, pretty epic. Definitely worth checking out and getting a click. We are about to wrap things up in like 5 minutes here or so. So if you have not yet checked out that handouts tab, please go check it out. Grab any resources that you want to hold on to from today. They're really great, really informational. And again, not always the easiest to find with a quick Google search. So make sure you get them before time is up. And with that, I do have a final prize to give away. The final prize is for, again, a $300 Amazon gift card. And this third and final prize is going out to Dane Vinson from Louisiana. Huge congrats to you, Dane. And just to recap, we have got our 3 lucky winners today: Tomo Kabahug from California, Anthony Modster from California, and Dane Vinson from Louisiana. And we will be reaching out after today's EcoCast to let you know how you can claim those prizes, as always. And you may just also win a $50 Best Question gift card from the sessions today. Again, 1 per presenter. So you have a 1 in 6 chance if you've been asking questions throughout today's webinar. And with that, if you are on today's webinar and you'd like to chat about presenting on a future summit, EcoCast, or MegaCast webinar, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. So if that is of interest, just reach out at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I do want to thank everyone on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team for making this possible today. I want to thank all of our speakers from TierPoint, Zscaler. Wow, my brain just went blank. Palo Alto Networks, No Name, Okta, HP Aruba Networking, Rubrik, and as I mentioned, Zscaler there for making this EcoCast possible. I also want to give a big shout out to our keynote speaker and Jess Steinbach for making the magic happen. Thank you, Lindsay Kay. And of course, a big thank you to all of you for tuning in. This is fantastic to take a little time and really learn what's on the forefront of tech. How can you integrate this into your organizations for best practices and keep ahead of the curve? So Thank you for being here. I hope you all learned something, and I hope you all kind of feel lit up, excited, ready to take what you've learned and perhaps implement it over the coming months in your organizations. Now, don't run off. If you are indeed excited about some of these topics in tech, we do have a megacast coming up tomorrow. This is about protecting and securing cloud environments. And we have not one, not two, but 4 presenters on there, kicking off at 12 p.m. Eastern or 9 p.m. Pacific. And with that, I'm going to let you go. I hope that you all have an absolutely magical rest of your day. And thank you for joining us. Until next time.